Three, two, one, and all right, go. All right, takes a little bit of time to start up here. I just want to confirm that we're live before I say, "Hey, everyone."
Oh, sure.
Um, so this
Plus, I
should
have
start
your
up pretty
chat
soon
over.
here.
I gotta make sure I mute your video.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we are definitely live at this point. Definitely live at this point. All right, what's up, everybody? OJ here. Welcome back to another debate. It's been a while since we've had one of these, man. It's so good to have one. This is going to be friendly debate. It's not going to be all crazy. I'm not going to throw a ninja star in Nate's eye, or anything like that. Although I could. I mean, I could ninja. I could. That's a bubblegum ninja star. I could. That's tomorrow, by the way. Tomorrow is Ninja debate. I'm excited to get into that. But we do have a debate going down tonight. We have myself, and we also have, of course, my guest, Nintendo Prime, Nate from Nintendo Prime. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm all right. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I can't complain. This quarantine sucks. But hey, it is what it is. At least I'm
Yes.
alive for now, so that's good, right? I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's
It's
good.
good. I think it's good that I don't know anyone who's died yet, so I think that's a good sign.
That's also good. Yeah, I don't know anybody personally who's died, but I do know people that have been affected in terms of like their family or stuff like that. So hopefully this thing can kind of just like, go away sometime soon. Apparently like the heat kind of kills it a little bit, so maybe that will help.
But
So
that we can always hope.
yeah, we can always hope, but we'll see. We'll see. But it's been rough for some people, but we're here. We're here. We live, and we try to provide some entertainment for you guys. So we're gonna go ahead and get to that. So basically, the whole basis of this whole thing it started a while ago with this whole Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition when Nintendo first showed it off. I think the first thing is the name. First and foremost is the name. It's called Definitive Edition. That throws people off in terms of remaster, remake, port, whatever the case is. I think Steam kind of picked up a little bit too, is when a popular YouTuber personality, Conrad, who's from Commonwealth, great YouTuber. I follow him. He put up a list in terms of Sony games and Nintendo games in terms of first half, and I actually didn't disagree with him. I thought the Sony games have been phenomenal. The only thing that that he added in was like, oh well, Xenoblade. I forgot to put Xenoblade, and he's like, well, that's just a port though. That's just a remaster. Like he kind of just like blew it off, But then he also mentioned Persona 5R, So that's kind of where this all got started, and I was like, oh well, I don't have a problem with what he's saying, but at the same time, like Xenoblade's not just a remaster. I just said no, it's more of a remake. And that's when Nate kind of jumped in and said, no, it's more of a remaster. And then there was a big old huge long
Oh my
thread
God. People,
on
I didn't have
there.
to say anything. People.
And then there's a big old huge long thread, and then more people chimed in. I know Stealth kind of chimed in, who's he's now a content creator.
Mhm.
He was like a Twitter kind of personality, and then analyst. He kind of chimed in. We had other people chime in from various different sides. Kind of go back and forth. Which this thing has been going back and forth a little bit for a while now. I think it kind of things slowed down a little bit after the first screenshots, but then again now it just kind of like popped back up. People think, oh well, no, I don't care about these screenshots. It's still a remaster, or people are making up their own definitions of what they think it is, which is fine. But I wanted to bring Nate on because he said it's more I think your quote was it's more of a remaster, not a remake. So let's just first start off. What is your definition of a remaster versus a remake? Or let's just say, what's your definition of a remake? How about that?
Oh well, it's hard to talk about one without the other, isn't it?
Okay.
Because the lines have kind of muddied over the years. It used to be pretty definitive because the terminology came from like movies and music, and how they use it, and then how it applied to video games. And it used to be extremely like definitive on what is what, and there's no debate. I mean, there's debate with marketing terms and how they have muddled things, but um, to me, like a full blown remake in a modern sense, because in past sense, a remake to me was basically just taking any game, throwing it in a new engine, looks pretty, you're good to go. You're just modernizing a game, which is kind of what a remaster does in a sense, but it doesn't usually back. At least when I was growing up, in a lesser sense. It was more so it's the same engine, it's the same this, it's the same that, just here's some new textures or here's some HD textures. As we know, 360, PS3, PlayStation 4 are a lot of HD remasters. And that kind of became pretty simple. You have like your full blown, we're just rebuilding the game from the ground up, to well, we're just HDing what's already there. But I think what's kind of happened, and it's through no fault of really anyone other than just consumers, demanding more and more and more from what is a remake and what is a remaster. That it's gotten to the point now where my personal expectations, unfortunately, for some people, I suppose, and some people really do not like my opinion, um, is that a remake requires just a lot more than just what a remaster does. Because a remake, not only is it new engine, rebuilt from the ground up, all that jazz, it also has to take a lot of new liberties with the game. It has to kind of, it doesn't need to go as far as like a reimagining, which is what I consider what Final Fantasy VII was, more of a reimagining, which is a remake in a sense, but different. That's like a whole new spectrum of remakes. But it needs to just do a lot more. I think a good example, and I actually saw this in, I think, a GamerRanks video a while ago. He brought up a good example here for like Ratchet and Clank. That was a nice remake. It took the original game, completely rebuilt it with a brand new engine, ground up, new visuals, all that, and it has a lot of the same premise and all the same stuff, but there's so much new in it that it's almost like a new game, even for those that are revisiting it. And I think that's kind of like the big difference for me between a remake and a remaster is when you have a remaster, it's still basically the same game, same combat system, same everything. It just looks a lot prettier, even if it's in a new engine and it runs better and all that stuff. And I think that's kind of where things get muddied as well, because technically there's new content in Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition as well. But I'm kind of setting that aside as more like, oh, they've just added some additional DLC after the fact. It's kind of what I'm treating that part as, because the main game is still... It's still going to be the same amazing game I played. My God, how long ago was that now? That was a long time ago.
10 years.
10 years.
Well, 8 years, I guess, if you want to talk about the U.S. release.
The
but
US version,
I have a question on your idea of that, because you say that it has to completely redo everything in terms of how the game plays or how stuff like that. So what's the difference between, because Shadow of the Colossus, I want to get your take on that. Shadow of the Colossus is a remake. They market it as a remake. It is remade. Is it a remaster of a remaster? Even though it's greatly improved, the gameplay is pretty much the same. But that's a remake, and that's pretty much everyone had no problem with calling that a remake. But it's the same game. So how is that one a remake?
And this is where the marketing terms just really.
Well, no, it's not just marketing terms, though. This is what people were saying. But wait, hold up. This is what people were saying, though, Nate. You called it a remake, too. You never called it a remaster. You called it a remake. We all said it's a remake, right?
Well, that's because that's the terminology they used. And
so are you going off of what they use, or are you going off of what you think?
I always go off of my own personal opinion on everything. Like, if they call it, like, as an example, you know, if they call it Final Fantasy VII Remake, okay, I will call it a remake. If they call it a remaster, well, fine. I'll say it because it's the title of the game, or that's what they say. It doesn't mean that I believe that that would be a remaster. In this case, with Shadow of the Colossus, when they... What is that, the third time they messed with the game? I think it's the third. Yeah.
It was the original PS2. And then it was remastered on the PS3. And then it was remade on the PS4.
Yeah. And, you know, I only dabbled in the PS4 version a little bit, so I don't have a lot of experience with it to know if there was really a lot of significant differences. It felt pretty similar the first couple hours I played. Just looked better. And played, I guess, a little better. Maybe controlled a little better. I don't know.
Frame rate's better. Controls are better. There's a photo mode at the same time.
Sure.
But everybody called that a remake. Yet it was technically the same game that we played on PS3 and on PS2.
Yeah, and was that in a new engine too, I believe, right?
It wasn't a new engine. Bluepoint remade the game. It's a new engine, and which kind of brings me to my point with Xenoblade. Yeah. That is in a brand new engine.
Sure.
You know, it's in the Torn of the Golden Country engine. Now, here's what I think where some people are getting tripped up. It's interesting because you have like the Future Connected. That's not remastered.
Yeah, that's all new.
That's brand new. Yeah. So it's very interesting. So it's like, well, the base game is a remaster, but then Future Connected is a new game. Is it split? So that's where I kind of take it. It's just a remake with added new content. You have, in my opinion, significantly improved graphics. There's flat textures that are literally 3D in this one. The art style.
It looks better than Xenoblade Chronicles 2, if I'm being honest.
Oh, yeah, well, because it's in the new engine. Because Torna looks better than 2, so it's in that new engine. So they're not just taking, and I guess my definition would be, your definition, it leaves too much wiggle room. That's what I would think. My definition would be like, it would be based on a code level. Not what I think or what the developers are saying. Square Enix called Final Fantasy VIII a remaster. That is, they lost the source code. They remade the game, but yet they called it a remaster. They remade the game. Dragon Quest was remade for the Switch. They called it Definitive Edition. That's Nintendo's marketing there. Well, just call it the best version of the
Yeah,
game.
Nintendo doesn't like to get into that debate too much.
Exactly. Nintendo doesn't call things remake, I mean, or anything like that. On top of that, I think if this game came out on the Wii U, there'd be zero discussion if this was a remake or a remaster. Everyone would have just called it a remake. And that's, I think, what the issue that I have here is that Final Fantasy VII, which is clearly clouding people's judgments, no pun intended.
Oh, that game.
Completely
Unrealistic expectations now on remakes.
Well, I think that's where we're getting at here. And that's why I think maybe even your opinion might be a little bit clouded too from games like that. Because even if you look at a game like Panzer Dragoon, not drastically different from what they did. Now they added HD, kind of looks dolphinish. You know, there's some added stuff here and there, but it essentially looks pretty much like a dolphin emulated game. So I think that's the biggest issue that I have here. People aren't giving it enough credit. They're just calling it a remaster and thinking that they just plopped it there when there's clearly new models, there's clearly new UI, there's clearly brand new content that wasn't remastered from anything. There's clearly new source code. Yes, there's probably reused animations. That's probably something that's reused, but new games reuse animations that are still considered new games. Doom Eternal reused animations. Smash Brothers reused animations. Lots of games reuse animations. Still new. Still be a new game.
Sure.
So I think that's where my issue is.
Well, for me, it's a lot, and I just keep going back to I don't know. I guess that GamerX video where he mentioned in there, and it's just something I strongly agree with. I guess in the more modern sense, is that we're kind of getting away from things just being like HD remastered anymore. Like if they're gonna bring an old game back, they're almost always now starting to be put in new engines. And I have a problem with yeah, a lot of them, like even some of the stuff you brought up, they were slapped in the new engines and called a remake, even if it was a lot of the same game and it just felt the same. And I think that's where I'm trying to draw this distinction between just because you take something and put it in the new engine and build it from the ground up or whatever, claim built from the ground up. Not the same as making a new game, of course, because I mean they did this in like a year or however long. Compared to how long they took to make, say, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 or something. It's a situation to me where it sucks because I'm starting to mingle reimagining and remaster together or remake together. But a remake to me, at least nowadays, and setting Final Fantasy VII aside, I haven't even played it, so it's easy for me to look at some videos and see, oh man, this is way different than what I played when I was younger, but I don't have any personal experience, and I do believe personal experience can play a role in it, because if you go and you play like the original Xenoblade Chronicles and then you play this game, and beyond some UI changes and all this stuff, I guess you would say quality of life improvements to the game and visuals, a lot of people are going to be like, hey, I've already played this game. It's exactly the same besides that new content edition. It's exactly the same. The combat's the same. The story's the same. The voice acting's the same. The music maybe's remastered a bit, but it's the same.
Music's remastered. Yeah, music's remastered.
Yeah, but so like it leads to that situation to me where like you're just playing the same game. It just looks prettier, and that's what most people are going to get away from it. And in my mind, if that's pretty much the same game but prettier, that's a remaster. I don't care if they put it on a new engine because it doesn't feel new. It just feels I'm just revisiting something I've already played.
We're not saying if it's a new game or not. We're saying if
that's
it's remade
that's
or
part of my
not,
definition for a remake.
So, but that's not the actual definition of a remake.
It's
a remake is
like,
something that's actually.
I'm trying to think
a
of
remake is actually something that's remade. You can make a game that's exactly the same, but if it's remade, it's remade. Shadow of the Colossus. I always go back to Shadow of the Colossus because that game seems to trick up these people that say, "Oh, well, it's the same," but it wasn't with Shadow of the Colossus. I did not hear anybody say that. They didn't say, "Oh, well, it's the same, so it's a remaster." Nobody called it that. But now with Xenoblade, all of a sudden, people want to call it a remaster. So I want you to, if you can answer for stop brushing Shadow of the Colossus off to the side. That is a remake. Blue Point, that is a remake. Everyone said it was a remake in 2018.
But it's a remaster.
And it plays the same.
It was a remaster.
It's not a remaster. The game was already remastered on PS3.
But again, this is
the PS3 version is a remaster.
Okay, but again, it's the same game, looks prettier, plays the same. To me, you try to take one of my definitions of remake and just eliminate it. Oh, that is not a new game. But oftentimes when something's remade, that's exactly what it feels like. When you have a new artist that remakes an old song from like the 50s or 60s, it's the same song, same track, same lyrics, but it sounds completely different in a way because it's been remade in their own style. When you take a movie, guys, this happens in movies all the time. Movies are remade all the time. Old movies remade in the new movies. It's still different. There's still some different storyline plots. There's some different, just the way it's shot, the way the cinematography is done. Just the script itself could even have some slight changes to it, even if it's the same base story, because maybe it was based on a book back in the day or whatever. And like it almost feels like even though it's something familiar, something you've seen, something you know, it's still different. It feels like something is a new experience. So I don't like eliminating the whole new game from the process, because I think that's kind of what a remake to me feels like. It's like you're playing a new game that just feels familiar.
Let's take a look at some of these other games, like Spyro, for example.
Sure,
Same
Spyro
game,
Reignited.
So that's a remake, but you're saying it's a remaster. It's not a remake, even though everyone knows that it's a remake and everyone treated it as a remake. What about Crash Bandicoot? What about Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes? These games that were literally the same game, but they
they're
were
all
remade.
remasters to me.
But Nate, that's your revisionist history here. These were all remakes when they came out. Nobody called them remasters of anything. They all said, "Oh, it's remade. It's a remake." Everyone treated these games as remakes, and now all of a sudden, now they're remasters, not remakes.
Well,
here's
this
the thing,
is the
Nate. Nate,
because
here's the thing.
okay,
here's the thing. Sure. You're confusing what an actual remaster is. A remaster is when they take the source code, they plop it into something, and it literally looks the same but smoother. Here's an example of that. Ico or whatever, or Shadow of the Colossus. Another example, Devil May Cry, the new Devil May Cry. They took that game from the PS3, they put it on PS4, remastered it, runs in 60 frames per second, runs in 1080p, but it looks exactly the same as the PS3 and 360. We've seen this before. The BioShock.
I just call those ports. I just call them BioShock ports. Infinite. I don't even call them remasters at that point.
They're remasters because they But
I don't. I didn't call it that. Other people might have called it that.
But you're factually not classifying things correctly now, because that's what a remaster is.
I call a game that's ported that just has updated textures not a remaster to me, because
that's what a remaster. That's the definition of a remaster, like you said with movies and stuff.
Well, this is
like they enhance the quality. A port would just be something where it's just ported. There's no enhancement of quality. Whatever the case is, there's no enhancement. But if you want to talk about a remaster, they increase the quality. See,
but then if you look at remasters, but if you look at what remasters and remakes of, as the movie examples are, there is not a single remade movie out there that you look at it and it's the same actors, the same cast, the same people, the same story, the same this, the same that. They're completely different. It feels like a whole new movie. I understand it's a little hard because when you remaster a movie, you literally are just like taking, say, a DVD quality, making it into Blu-ray quality or whatever. You're trying to take the original footage and get it out to people in a way that they haven't done it. Sometimes there's additional editing. We all know about the Star Wars, who shot first thing that got changed in the remastering of that film. But that's why I feel like what you're talking about is what I feel like the game industry was when I was growing up. Whenever you got a remaster, it was basically old game brought to new system, same code, same everything, better visuals, maybe a better frame rate. And that's kind of what we experienced in the PS3 360. I guess a little bit of the Wii U era as well. Some of the Switch era too. In some cases.
We experienced that before, Nate. I think that you're really. I think at this point you're kind of reaching to make your point, because remakes have been a thing for a very long time. Remakes have been around.
But when I was a kid, was I thinking?
We're not talking about kid. Let's talk about.
Well, that's why I brought up the era that I grew up in, which I was a kid for PS2,
and I.
But I was a kid for PS2. I didn't play PS2. Nate. I didn't play PS2. Let me just start there. I was an N64 boy. I didn't play PS2.
Nate, we're the same age. We were teenagers when the PS2 and all that was out. We were teenagers
that's a kid. I didn't look at things like, okay, here's a full confession. I didn't even care what a remaster or remake was until I was like 27. I just played games. Okay. I wasn't even aware if the game came out on prior systems. I just played games.
And I understand that. I guess like the whole point would be like going from like remaster, right? Because whenever we saw a remaster from, let's just say, from the PS2 era to the 360 or to whatever the case was, it was pretty clear that it was a remaster. It was pretty clear the game looked the same, right? Like it just looked shiny. And then when games were remade, you can clearly tell it might be the same game.
It's kind of like Twilight Princess HD situation.
Yeah, they were remade. So Twilight Princess HD is a perfect example because the game looks the same.
Yeah, it's the same
Xenoblade
game,
Chronicles
just higher resolution, basically.
literally does not. So it's remade, just like Twin Snakes, just like Spyro. The problem that I have is that all of these things that were literally remakes, nobody called Spyro, nobody called Crash Bandicoot. These games are recent. Nobody called them remasters because they were the same game. That narrative is being brought up here, and I really don't know why it's being brought up for this
Well,
game
I
only, when
think
it wasn't brought up for Crash and other games.
Well, I think the reason why the public, like me, I've always defined things a certain way once things evolved. Like I kind of explained my definition. People don't have to agree. I really don't care. It's ultimately a pointless debate because, as you and I kind of nodded and agreed on Twitter, like it doesn't really matter. Besides marketing, who cares? But fans seem to be really passionate on if it's a remake and if it's a remaster. I don't know if they associate quality to it for some reason, or if just because of what Final Fantasy VII has done now. It's like I think that's why the debate is happening, is because of what Final Fantasy VII.
People don't remember things, like, and I think that, like, with this game in particular, it's because it's an RPG, it's because the animations are the same, but like I said before, we've had games that literally do the same thing and have been called remakes. The developer said, yo, we remade the game in a brand new engine, it's completely remade, or we use some stuff here and there, it looks like it moves similar, but we completely remade so many different things. And that's what Xenoblade is. Definitely using some animations that they had before, but the game is remade. There are so many aspects of the game that are remade, and Future Connected is completely new.
Yeah,
That's
kind of the big bugaboo for me, is like, well, hey, there is some new content, so what are you supposed to say to that? It's like, yeah.
They didn't port the game from anywhere, and that's where remaster comes from. It comes from actually taking source code and porting to another system. That's what it is. Like I said before, if this game was more of a remaster, like you claimed it was, it would look like a Dolphin game, plain and simple. It would not have the art that it has. The art's completely different. The textures are completely different on the models. The models are completely different.
They've redone a lot of the game.
So what I don't understand is it shouldn't really be more of a remaster then, because remasters, like I said, look the same. They don't redo things as much as this game has redone things. I think that this definition where you have to completely change the way the game plays in order for it to be a remake, I think that's nonsense, because nobody did. I think it's a little bit of nonsense, because that's not the case with so many other games. Not all of a sudden it's the case here, because I didn't hear you call Spyro and those games remasters. I'm pretty sure everyone called them remakes. We're remaking the games. Everyone called it that, and now with this one, all of a sudden it's remaster. Shadow of the Colossus, everybody called it remake. Now all of a sudden it's a remaster.
Sure,
that's ridiculous. The game was two versions of a remaster. It's not the same thing. If we did that, then Devil May Cry, like that game's been remastered how many times? Collection. They did it on PS3, the collection, then they did it on PS4. I mean, it's not the same thing as what Sony did.
I'll give you an example, because I mean, you mentioned, I know you don't necessarily mean me specifically, you're just talking in general in terms of, people didn't say that Spyro Reignited was this. Well, I didn't say anything because I wasn't having the debate. I just made my video, it's coming to Switch, cool, and called it a day. But when one thing I did have a debate back, like way back in the day, and this just lets me know my mindset's been this way for a while. I thought that Ocarina of Time 3D, when that came to the 3DS, and that was completely redone in a whole new engine that Grezzo made, but it was the exact same game with hardly any. I was actually really disappointed. There was like no changes, because whole nother debate for another time on that game, but. I called it a remaster because I'm like, it's just the same game. It just looks better, even though it's in a new engine, even though there's gyro aiming now. It's the same game. And by like what you're saying, though, that would be considered a remake, and people maybe considered it a remake back then. I don't know, but I didn't. It's a whole new engine, all new assets they had to rebuild.
Definitely, I think they used they ported the game in the 3DS. They had a lot of games like Star Fox, right? Star Fox, Majora's Mask, these games I think they would just port the game code then build on top of it, which could be kind of like one of those.
Yeah, and that's something I don't remember exactly.
Hybrid type of deals.
Yeah, they talked back in interviews that it was a new engine, but I honestly didn't break down the code.
They ported the game.
Yeah.
They ported that. I mean, and that's what could have happened here with Xenoblade. I mean, they could take the code, and that's why the animations look the same. But there's too much stuff I think that's rebuilt in this one.
You know, that's my issue. Is like, what does a new engine even mean, right? Like when we think, a game's been brought to a new engine, the automatic assumption is, okay, so they started with nothing, with literally nothing, just started raw coding a game, and they just had an example to build off of and went off of that. Whereas what I know as someone who I actually have done some programming and I'm in school for programming right now, even when we move things to a new engine or a new platform, we just copy paste all the code in, and what doesn't run, we go in and error correct and fix, and then whoop, it's running in a new engine with different assets and different lines of code that we've learned from other things we've done. In this case, like when they put it in the, I guess is this the second modification of the engine? I know it started on Xenoblade Chronicles X, and then they used it in 2, and then modified it for Torna.
Yeah, they rebuilt quite a number of things for the Torna the Golden Country engine.
That's why Torna looks so much
pretty
better.
Yeah, it's been modified, over in terms of what they've done. But I think that, like I said before, I don't think a remake means you go from absolutely nothing and there's nothing that you have, and then you completely remake everything to the point where I just don't think
like
that's
I think about it like that's
so.
what a remake is. Like if I set this aside, like let's say I have a 3D printer, right, and I have this bottle, and I want to remake this bottle. I start from nothing and build a new one in a 3D printer, and that's suddenly the bottle, and it might look exactly the same. But we did that with Shadow of the Colossus, and you said that's a remaster. But they didn't start with nothing. What I'm saying, this is what I'm trying to explain to you. As someone who programs, they did not start with nothing. They took that code, they threw it at the new engine, and then built on top of it to make it look the way they did. And you're saying but have you ever gone into the game? Have you gone into the game code and actually compared line by line the game code to see?
That's
it's different.
What Bluepoint said. Bluepoint said that the game was remade. Bluepoint said that the game was remade.
Because that's again, marketing. It's all marketing because something being remade, something being a remake. Maybe we can agree on this point. Something being called or being remade or being called a remake is often considered a higher quality product, right?
A remake?
Yes, a remake. Like a remake, like people consider.
Yeah, it's
like Final Fantasy VII, really bad comparison because that's so far out this. Whatever, but you know what I mean, like that game, and then you have like Twilight Princess HD. People are going to consider, the Final Fantasy VII one, that's a remake. The other one's a remaster. Remakes are just a higher quality product because it's, in general, more effort or whatever the case might be. But that's the thing. When you are a developer and you want to hype your game up, why would you call it less than what you want it to be called so you get the more hype built for it? That's the problem that I have with my biggest problem with the whole terminology is how marketing use it and how developers use it. Because if you just copy pasted code into a new engine, modified it to run on that engine, but you're calling it a remake, you're like, no, there's not a single programmer in the world that starts.
I don't think, first of all, we can't prove that they copy pasted it. On top of that, copy pasting code is not something that you could just do on engines and all of a sudden everything just works perfectly.
That's what I'm saying though. You have an importer is what it's called. You have an importer that's built for the engine that ports in the code, and then it'll try running that code, and usually it's really choppy or there'll be bugs and all this stuff, and then you just go through and you literally are just patching code that already exists because nobody, when they're remaking a game that runs exactly the same, like Final Fantasy VII is different. That was obviously completely ground up. Everyone knows that. Like it doesn't even run the same way the other game. It's not even the same perspective. It's all different. But that's again the complete far end of the spectrum that I don't actually expect most remakes to go for. That's more of a reimagining, taking a game and just completely making it something different with the same story. And I think when it comes to the remake, what they need to do, at least what in my opinion, is what's happening with a lot of, I guess, the remasters in particular, is when they're putting them in these new engines, and this is just something I know from coding, is we use an importer and we port the code and then we patch the code and voila, we're running on a new engine.
I personally don't think, based off of who I've spoke with, especially with this, that you can just sit there, import code, and everything works.
No, that's what I just said. You import the code and then you patch it, and then you patch it. Okay. So it doesn't work right away, but they're not. When you have a game like Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition that runs and the animations are the same. The combat's the same. Like everything's pretty much the same beyond some menus, and obviously the quality of life. Quality of but everything. I mean, what's different about the combat?
The models aren't the models.
You could swap out a model and use the same code base. The code base doesn't change if the model changes. That's 3D artist. That's 3D artist.
We're talking about being. But look, we're talking about being remade. We're talking about the game being remade.
Sure, but if you're
right?
using, you could use the same code base and still put that model on there. That's got the
But we don't know
modeling has
you're
nothing
just
to do with code.
the problem that I have is that you're just assuming, oh well, you could just take the same code and then it's just there. So this is why I'm calling it a remaster.
Well,
Because it's
no,
not
when
enough
you
that it's
watch
changed,
it and
you
the
know?
animations are exactly the same, that lets me know
can
they
use
are
the
reusing,
animations.
but they're reusing code. The animations
That
are
doesn't
completed
make
with code.
that doesn't make it a remaster. Just like Smash Brothers reuses
You
animations, that
you
doesn't make
said
it.
your own definition said because the code is different, and it's like yes, there's factually going to be some
They're
differences in the
changing
code,
code. This is not the same code plopped into there because
but
you
it's
think
not.
animations are the same when they literally facial animations have changed and things have. It's not one to one with every single thing in the game. You think it is, but it's
No,
not. If
just
you
because
actually watch, there are multiple things that
this
have
is so
changed with
hard
the
to talk to
animations.
someone who doesn't code, who doesn't know how code works, because
Nate,
they took the code, they slapped it in the engine, and they
Nate,
added things to
no,
it.
they did.
Oh
No,
my
Nate,
gosh.
no, they didn't. You don't know if they did that. That's the problem that I have. First of all, when you don't know that they did that, and second of all, there's already things that they've changed quite a bit. It's not the same just code that you're trying to.
Yes,
claim that it
because
is.
there's
That's
the
all I'm
engine can
saying.
do new things, so they patch those
You
things
don't
into
know
the
that, bro.
code.
Bro, you don't know what the end.
But you don't either.
never
You're
worked
you're
with
you're but I've worked on video games. Do you want to? I've literally coded video games and ported them into different engines.
But you haven't worked on anything like Xenoblade. And not only that, you're calling Shadow of the Colossus a remaster.
Yes, I am calling it a remaster. I guarantee you over
So
half
you
the
think
code
it's
is
the same-
reused. I guarantee you over half the code's reused. When people
Over
are
half the
making a
code's
game that
reused.
plays exactly the same as a prior game and just looks a lot better with a better frame rate and all this stuff, what happens is they're reusing code because programmers are going to use the code that's already there. Why would they remake code they already have
They
that
have
does
to
what they need to
change
do?
code in order for
They don't
things
necessarily
to
have to change-
operate better. Yes, they do. Nate.
No, that's part of
They
optimization
don't
when
leave
you're
everything the
optimizing
same.
your
They don't leave
engine.
everything with the code the same. I know you want to think that, so you can try to say this right here, but they don't.
No, I'm
I mean,
just
if you
telling.
think everything in the code, the code's the same because you see
No.
some animations there.
No,
Okay,
I'm saying they ported the code into the engine and then edited and added to the code on top of the code that already existed for the game. They,
So then
they made
it's-
changes to that code to make it better.
So then here's the thing:
With the current
remasters, real remasters, don't change that type of stuff. Devil May Cry, that's been ported. Looking at games like the PS3 version of Shadow of the Colossus, they don't make those changes, Nate. They just take the code, they plop it in there, and they upscale it. Sometimes it runs in better.
That's
but they
not
don't
entirely
make the
true.
Type of changes.
I have one counter argument to it. It's not entirely
name
true.
a bunch of games that have done that.
No, I'm saying
Name
it's
it.
not entirely true because they run at a better frame rate, and that's not possible
run at a
without
better
messing with
frame
the,
rate,
that's not
but that's
possible.
just from-
If you just take the same engine, the same code, and slap it on better hardware, it doesn't necessarily run better when you're programming. That's not how it works. You have
They
to
make some
optimize
they
it.
make some adjustments and everything,
Yeah.
but this is clearly different with with Xenoblade compared to Shadow of the Colossus on PS3. It clearly is.
Would
different.
you think this? This is a weird thing because I wonder how much of this you're basing on the visuals. If they didn't replace the models and they just gave us the same models but in HD, would you be saying the same thing?
Well, there's different animations in terms of.
But
what
even
they've
with the
shown
new
so far,
animations,
too.
if they use the same old models from the original game but just in HD, no, they dolphined it with some new animations added in. Would you
If they
consider that a
dolphined
remake?
it with some, if they dolphined it,
Or
with
it's
some
just
new
what it
animations,
would feel like playing it, not knowing
it
the
would
history.
depend.
Of it.
It would depend on what they changed. It would depend on what they changed and what they did. I mean, you can have the game that's remade and it looks the same, but maybe they remake a bunch of different the game. You know what I'm saying? So that's that. They could have just done that, but they didn't. What they did with this game is that they actually have they remake stuff in the game. The game is being remade to a number of different things. You know, maybe they
Yeah,
wanted to keep the gameplay
it's just
the same because the gameplay's good, and maybe they didn't want to change the flow of gameplay that they had. So they remade everything that they needed to remake in order to update it. The game was already ahead of its time when it came out. It doesn't really need a bunch of different things to remake with the animations and all that type of stuff. It's already a huge, massive game. And if you look at the environments and if you look at the models and you look at everything, everything's already really, it looks really good. So to me, in my opinion, if you take that much time to remake the models and redo the art, that's definitely more on the remake territory. And then of course you put it on the new engine. You do a bunch of different things. Obviously, you've got to change the code up. It's not just the same code.
Well, yeah,
plopped
there
in
are
with a little bit of
changes.
with a little bit of
are
optimization
changes,
here
yes.
and there, like they did with like they did with DMC. DMC is a game that they did not take a lot of time to change a bunch of stuff. It looks exactly the same. It runs in better frame rate. We know about that type of stuff. They could have done that if they wanted to, and it would have looked like a Dolphin game running in 60 frames per second KDP.
Do you know? I don't know, and I know you've been following the game more closely than I. Do you know when they started development on the Definitive Edition?
Based off of recruiting, they probably started about 2 years ago.
About 2 years ago. So like right when they pretty much right when they wrapped up Xenoblade, pretty much down to that point.
Yeah, pretty much when they wrapped up Xenoblade. Not everybody was working on Xenoblade.
Well, they have a bigger
too,
team
though.
that helps Zelda for some reason. They actually have making the game.
Well, they have 5 different teams, and about 3 of them are auxiliary teams helping out with Animal Crossing, Zelda, various different things. Then you have the main team, Takahashi, who's doing that. Then they have like another team that's like a asset team and all that helps out with a bunch of art and all that. The main team is working on this game. The main team necessarily didn't all work on Xenoblade Chronicles 2. That had about maybe 40 to 50 people with some outside contracted help while they were putting the first initial phases and plans for Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. What we know about ports or remasters from the Switch is that it can take anywhere from 9 months to a year or so from a lot of these games. Skyrim took about that time. Diablo took about that time. They've been working on this one a bit longer than what you'd see for a normal remaster.
Well, it also depends on
port.
That probably also depends on how big the team is, because they were also still doing the DLC for Xenoblade during that time. So
yeah, but they did that with with that same base team in terms of Torna. They did that. Torna's a much smaller game. Have you played it? Torna?
Yeah, I played it a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, it's a much smaller game. I mean, and they all planned that there. That team was working on that, but they already had a whole other team that was working on something else, which I think they're working on a couple projects. They have their new IP that they're working on.
Yeah.
And they're working and they're working on this game. So I'm looking at it this way. Like,
and I bet you there's a new Xenoblade somewhere cooking.
Probably. I think the biggest thing that I think it would be nice, I guess, is if we can say, hey, remasters are remasters. It's pretty clear to see what a remaster is. You look at Shadow of the Colossus on the PS3, that's a remaster. You look at Shadow of the Colossus on the PS4, that's a remake. Because they could have made it look just like the PS3 version of the game. If they really wanted, they could have just done that. You look at Legend of Zelda, Twilight Princess HD. That's a remaster.
Sure.
The game was that's a remaster. You know what I'm saying?
I agree with that.
You look at Link's Awakening. That's a remake. That's clearly a remake of the game. Operates kind of the same as the original. Kind of has the same gameplay as the original. They've added some things or not. It's not drastically different in terms of things. In terms of gameplay, kind of similar. But is that a remaster because the gameplay is similar?
I called it a remaster when it was announced, so.
But it's clearly not a remaster. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it all comes down to just a difference of definitions of what we consider to be remasters and remakes. And I get that there's like literal definitions that exist out there. And the reason why I just stopped using them is because once I started seeing some developers call things remakes and remasters that went against what the literal definitions were, I was like, well, you know what? Then the definitions don't matter in the gaming industry, because those definitions were made before video games were really diving deep into it, because remastering things and remaking things have been going on all over the world in a bunch of different mediums. So I don't know that those definitions apply. I guess a lot of it's just mind share. When I look at all the guys watching on both the channels here, I've seen a lot of really good discussion happening. Some people just calling us both idiots because that's just the way it goes, but that's the internet for you. But I think a lot of it just comes down to, I see people on both sides of the fence debating even harder than we are, because people just have different definitions in their mind of what they consider to be a remake versus a remaster. Like, to me, a remake is you're making it from the ground up, and if you're not making it from the ground up and it doesn't have a bunch of differences in it to make it feel like a new game, then all you're doing is just taking the game that's already there and improving it. Remaster. That's literally my definition of remaster. Taking the game that's already there and improving it. Cool. That's a remaster.
So somebody could generally take a game, by your definition, completely remake it in terms of models and everything, make it animate and just the same, and it's not a remake of the game.
If it's using the
everything, sound, gameplay, whatever the case is, but it's a remaster.
If it plays exactly the same and it uses the same code, it's just a remake that had different art assets thrown on, or a remaster. Here's the thing, that had different art assets.
Here's the thing with this code thing, though. But we can never know how much code is being used. What's the percentage that a game uses
Well,
how much code than we know before it's a remake or a remaster. Your
you can find it out,
real
but
dicey.
it takes a lot of effort to find
It takes
out.
a while. Your definition is really dicey. It's hard to market that to people. And so now
Well,
all of a
that's why
sudden
they
with your
don't use it when they
definition,
market. They just label it whatever they think is going to sell more
well,
copies. Or if
going
you're
by your
Nintendo, you
definition,
just avoid it altogether.
I know, but going on your definition, it really it's a kind of a slap in the face to the Xenoblade developers because
Well,
they're remaking so many different things, and then you're putting it in the
but is
basket
it a
with
slap in the face?
Twilight
Does it
Princess
affect the
HD.
quality of the game? The game's still going to be great. It was already a great game.
Yeah,
It's still going to
it's
be
just
great.
that it does the same stuff that like Conrad did. Like, oh well, it's just a remaster, so I'm not gonna count it there. You know what I'm saying?
But what is
when it's clear,
that should-
when it's clearly
that's a
obviously
mindset.
it's
I think
more
that's a
than that,
mindset with people where they write things off because of how they want to label it, and that's what I think the fan debate happens between remake and remaster. Remake holds more weight than a remaster does in terms of, I guess, selling power and buying power and people's hype. They get more hype for a remake than they do a remaster, and it's like the definitive edition term. It doesn't really mean anything. Nintendo's used that on other games that are clearly just ports from the Wii U. So like, it's not. Nintendo tries to avoid the debate altogether, which is probably good. Good on Nintendo because fans care way more about this than I think they should. I don't know that we've ever seen like stats that show sales are actually affected by how it's marketed, remaster or remake, and what fans consider it. It's usually just based on, is it a popular game that people want to play again? That's usually what determines if people are going to buy it. Final Fantasy VII is widely considered one of the greatest games of all time. No matter how they remastered or remade it or whatever, people were going to buy it. And that same thing, like with Xenoblade, the benefit that Xenoblade Chronicles gets now is not only does it look better than the last time maybe people experienced Xenoblade for the first time with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Xenoblade's more popular now than it was back then. So you actually have a whole new audience that can get to experience the original and actually maybe be really impressed and like it better than 2 because they've learned a lot with that engine and with everything they're doing to make things look and feel better. Plus, people already thought the original was better than 2 anyways, but that's obviously personal opinions and what you prefer.
I think like I said, I think with this one here, people are kind of like in between. I mean, and I think to me it kind of leans more on the side of a remake because, like I've said, I've seen so many remastered games, and those are usually, let's just be honest, they're lazier. They're quite lazy. When something's
I just call
flat
them,
or pixel,
yeah. That's why like a lot of the really lazy ones, I don't even call them remasters. They're just literally
they're
HD ports. They're dolphin ports.
Well, that's a remaster because, like, if you're like I said, if you're
but think about it on Dolphin though. Sometimes you don't even have to download assets. The assets are already in HD. They're just not presented to you because the system wasn't in HD.
The level of quality, that's subjective in terms of what you call it before it's a remaster or not. But any improvement in quality is called a remaster. If you improve the quality,
yeah, I know that's the traditional term of remaster.
That's the traditional term of remaster, and that's kind of like that's why I don't like these custom terms because then people start creating their own rules to what a remake and a remaster is. It's like, oh, this game it plays exactly the same, so I'm going to call it a remaster, despite the developers taking a long time, way longer than any developer that would make a remaster. Right? Way longer than that. I can guarantee you Shadow of the Colossus on the PS4 took a lot longer to develop than Shadow of the Colossus on the PS3. Guarantee you they took way more time crafting that one in terms of they did. So the fact that it's being lumped into that and saying, oh, well, since it plays the same, therefore it's just like that. That's just, I think that's wrong. It's just wrong. We shouldn't have to go through that, especially when remakes and remasters aren't a new concept. All of a sudden, this gets brought up, and now people want to bring this up.
It's
like
expectations. People's expectations have changed. Just simply porting something to put in HD isn't good enough for a lot of people anymore.
I don't know if people's expectations have changed
because now we're going on. What are we on? We're coming up on our 3rd generation of HD systems. Like people just things being in HD or being moved from 1080p to 4K isn't going to be enough for a lot of people. They expect more when these games are brought over.
And expectations are one thing, but definition, facts, and like what's been going on is another thing. So just because you expect something doesn't mean you can change the definition of something. And I think that's the problem that I have. It's like, oh, well, my expectations are this, so therefore this is the new definition. Despite there being decades of history of this happening and things being one way, all of a sudden I want to think this
Well,
way
a
because
lot of
my
the
opinion is I expect more.
but a
So
lot of
now
the
my
history,
definition changes.
a lot of the history was just taking games that weren't in HD and putting them in HD. Now we're in an era where okay, now you're taking HD because every game you brought up was a game that wasn't in HD put in the HD.
No, Metal Gear Solid was not. Metal
Well,
Gear
sure.
Solid is a remake. Yeah, Super Mario All Stars. I mean, there's so many games that were remade in ways and things changed and
What
graphical
does Super Mario All
updates.
Stars a collection pack have to do with anything?
Well, they upgraded the graphics in that game.
It's still a remaster.
I know, but I'm saying that remasters and remakes have
Okay,
been
I
happening
thought
for
for
a
a second
long
you were calling that a remake. I was like, whoa,
No,
whoa,
remasters
whoa.
and remakes have been happening for a
Yeah.
long time. This is even like the GameCube. The GameCube got a remake of Resident Evil. It got a remake of Resident Evil. It was a completely new graphics, completely new stuff. Played like the original, kinda. You know, had the same
Yeah,
layout and
I can't
everything.
comment because I actually didn't play the original, so I can't comment.
Okay,
on that.
well, you should check it out. You
I should check it
the-
out. Yeah, I played a lot of
Check out
RE
the
games.
original, then check out the remake. Layout's the same, a lot of
Yeah.
stuff the same. They changed some things around, but remakes have been around for a while. Now all of a sudden we get into the Zoomer age, and people want to sit there and
boy.
say, well, people want to sit there and say, oh well, since it doesn't do this, then
I
this,
hate those Zoomer, Boomer, whatever.
we get into this
ages.
age.
Oh my god.
Where people want to sit there and make up their own definitions based on what they think, despite things have been going on for a while now, Nate. You know, like remakes have been happening for a long time. Metal Gear Solid added a like first-person mode, but the gameplay was pretty much it was the same. They added some new modes and some new stuff that you can do.
I got a
but
question.
The gameplay and the game was the same.
So
Yeah.
have definitions of words changed over time as things have changed? Just in general.
I think that there's some people that are being influenced by how developers do stuff new. Not at this point, but that it doesn't erase what an original definition is.
Because if you go through the dictionary,
what's
you're
happening.
going to find a ton of words that here's the original definition. People stop using them that way, and now they use it in a different way, and now that's considered the official definition of the word. The reason I bring it up is because the definition of term in the gaming industry is really bad about this, and maybe it's just what you say, the Zoomer age. I don't know. I don't pay attention to that garbage. I don't even know what age I'm considered. Gen Z? Am I Gen Z?
You're a millennial.
Millennial,
You're
yeah.
a millennial.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm fine with that because Backstreet Boys are my jam, and they have a Millennium album. I'll take that.
All right.
Anyways, yeah. I know. Not necessarily the least embarrassing. Actually, I could say something way more embarrassing than that, but another stream.
You don't have
Gotta
to.
save it. Gotta save it. Anyways, but yeah, like I think it's just the sign of the times is, you know, things when I was a kid, the way that people talked and the way words were used are different than they're used now. And when I'm 80, the way people talk and use words then and terminology is going to be different than what it is now or what it was even, 20 years prior to that. And I think what's happening, and I don't even think this is an exclusive thing to this age group. I think it's just that there's the age group before them, and then there's this one, and then they're taking the terms and they're forming them into what they feel it should mean. Hence the increased expectations on what a remaster is. And I just kind of fall into that later category.
You mean a remake? Expectations of what a remake is?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. Like what a remake is, because obviously, I agree with you in hindsight looking back. You can say, well, that's a remake, that's a remaster, etc. But like, I wasn't looking at games that way back then. And the first time I ever did was Ocarina of Time 3D, and even then, that was the only game I really even looked at that way. Like, I didn't even think about the Wind Waker or Twilight Princess HD, what those were. It wasn't even something that crossed my mind, because I just didn't care. It wasn't really until I got into YouTube that I started realizing that people really care about this crap that means nothing.
Yeah, but I think that I think the biggest problem is that
and so my definition just comes from what I've realized everyone around me seems to be using. Except for you and obviously the people that came from the our age or whatever, and I think that's just a difference in age groups, because whatever they think, the age group after the Zoomers is going to think something completely different about that terminology.
And I think that's why I'm having this discussion, because we look at it like I'm not down for revisionist history. Because the problem is that if you want to acknowledge how it was, then acknowledge. But a lot of these people aren't even acknowledging how it was. They're just sitting here. We're going to start with here, and this is what we're going to expect because I played this, and this game. That is the worst attitude to have. Is like, since this game did this, I'm going to change my definition because we expect more. that's expecting more in terms of is the game quality or not.
Well,
That should
they
not change
expect more
that
from the
should not
remake. They expect more from what a remaster and a
the game could
remake
be
is.
lower. The game could be lower quality than the original game, and you're propping it as something that's better, yet it could be lower quality or it could be worse. If you sit
Well,
there and completely
there's like
change the
there's
game,
like people who legit think that not a lot, but I've seen some people that legit love the original Final Fantasy VII that don't like the combat system, the action RPG
well,
combat system, so it just ruins the whole remake for them.
yeah,
And but I don't think that they're not sitting there saying, oh, because I don't like it, it's not a remake. They still consider it a remake because the reason they don't like it is
no,
because it
they
feels like a new game.
they they consider it a remake because a lot of people are look at titles and they say this. I guarantee you, if this was called Xenoblade Chronicles Remake, people would just be like, well, it's a remake. Like, people aren't looking at it like, well,
Well,
the code is
well
changed in this certain
again, but
aspect.
that goes back to the
I think
marketing terms
it's
and stuff.
definitely that. People with this discussion, if this was on Wii U and it was called Remake, we wouldn't be having discussion. If this was on Switch and they just called it Xenoblade Chronicles Remake, people wouldn't be like,
Well, I
am
wouldn't
I
have been having
question
the discussion on Wii U because I wasn't a
am I
YouTuber back then.
am I questioning this because people didn't do this with Shadow of the Colossus when they flat out said it. People didn't do this with Spyro. People didn't do this with Crash. People didn't do this with any of these games here. And those
Well,
have similar
again,
animations. Those have similar stuff.
I think a
So
lot of it is the Final Fantasy VII effect. Um,
and maybe Resident Evil.
maybe Resident
Maybe
Evil, yeah, the remakes,
Resident.
like those
Yeah.
look like. I think what's happened is that lately, full blown remakes are just going above and beyond anything that we've ever thought a remake was. And I think ultimately that's what's making people change their opinions on what's a remake versus what's a lazy port versus what's a remaster. And I don't even consider ports and remasters the same thing. People can disagree with me. I really don't care, because any literally we see people messing around that are just amateurs at their house that spend a week and can make things look sometimes better than what an HD port looked like. So like I know there's like no effort put into it, and I think there's got to be some effort put into remastering something because if it's just like I took an AVI file and like put it into a different format, and it just happens to sound a little bit better when I did that. I didn't put any effort into that. That was just a rendering process. So, I think that it's just a difference in age groups. It's a difference in the way people are using terminology today, just in general. I mean, the words that are used today just don't mean what they meant when I was a kid. And I don't really have anything. Like, I came into this debate, and I literally told your fans and my fans, I'm about to get my butt handed to me because I know your argument. I know what it is because it's an easy one to make because that's our history. That's what we grew up with. And when I thought back on it, after we agreed in the debate, I'm like, well, yeah, this is what a remaster used to be. This is what a remake, used to be. And why should we change the terminology? And I think it's just because we grew up that way, so that's the way we expect things to be. But if you don't grow up that way, you don't expect that anymore. And what's happening is the new gamers are starting to grow up where, dude, Resident Evil 2, Final Fantasy, that's what they expect now out of a remake. Well, they expect a remaster to be what Xenoblade is or what some other games are.
I think that's maybe half right, half wrong. We're looking at guys like there's guys that are older that are our age or older that grew up, and it's not just necessarily new people.
Yeah.
When I said Zoomer, I was just joking around.
Yeah, yeah.
There's people that are our age or older that are also or people that are users that have lived through that, and now they're trying to say this is like if you completely reboot something or reimagine something that kind of has its own thing in its own right. I don't and with Xenoblade, it's definitely being like I said, it's more remade a lot of different things. It's not the same as a remaster. So I think I'm looking at like if you look at Final Fantasy VII, for example, that's a complete reimagining, and which some people have noted in the chat, but this is something that is complete reimagining. I mean, what are you remaking? You're taking some of the characters and all that stuff like that, but you're remaking some of the scenes, you're remaking some stuff, but there's so many new things that are added in. That's completely reimagined, completely different from what a remake of a game. If the developer wants to make a faithful remake of something, should they be relegated now down to remaster? Because we didn't change completely everything with the game, so now all of a sudden, even though we're remaking the game,
the issue is
we don't get called a remake anymore.
And maybe the issue is, and maybe this is partly on, I guess, us as people who have an audience or whatever, is that maybe we just shouldn't put any weight into what those terms mean, because people are using them differently. Before this, I was trying to research, what's the general consensus from like what video game media and gamers are saying on Reddit and all this. I was just looking up like what's a remake versus a remaster in video games. Literally typed it in Google, read I don't know, a couple dozen websites and watched a few videos. I'm like, nobody agrees on any of it. All anyone can agree is that remake means it's better than a remaster. That seems to be the only consensus, and I just hate that idea that you could have a remake that's worse than what a remaster would have been. I don't think that should be a mutually exclusive way to think about it. Like Final Fantasy VII, the reimagining that is technically falls in the remake category, could have been horrible. It could have not worked. It appears to have worked. I can't speak from personal experience, but it appears to have worked from those I've talked to that have played it.
I've played and beat it. No, it works. It definitely works. I mean, I think it's a great game.
I think the only main criticism I've seen is either if you don't like the combat system, which you weren't going to like the combat system if you don't like action RPGs, you're not going to like it. That's fine. But and then obviously people don't like that it's split up. Like this is only the first part. There's going to be more coming, so it's not really the full game.
Yeah. I mean, it's a full game, but then
I think people are just happy that they got this much. Like where it ended, from what I read, where it ended, I'm like, well, that makes a good. You just know there's more.
I think I think that's one of the things with people today is that if you simply went off your history, then we probably wouldn't have these issues. And I think that's where I'm coming from. If you simply just go off of history instead of trying to make up your own definitions as time goes along, then be confused as hell and stumble along and say, oh, well, I didn't call it a remaster back then, but I'm calling it a remaster now because my definitions changed. Instead of just doing that, maybe we can just go by really the basis that we have. Drastically improve the visuals, drastically improve, added things, definitely code changed. It's not just the same thing because we've seen what happens when code is the same.
I'll say this.
We've generally seen it.
A lot
when
of the
add
things...
a bunch of stuff and add a bunch of models and add a bunch of things that are added in. Maybe there's some things that's left over. That's fine. New games are still new games when they borrow some. So I think that if we can just move towards that, because it's pretty clear what a remaster would look like if they dolphined it on the Switch. We've seen it before. We've seen the people literally custom do that and spend a lot of time.
I've seen it in 4K.
So let's just, if we can just keep the definition how it was, which was when Twin Snakes came out, and with all these games that were also being remade that have came out before Resident Evil, it would be much easier to figure things out instead of saying, well, Final Fantasy came out and that completely redid things and that's called remakes. That's called remake. That game has to do that because, or Resident Evil came out and it's completely different from what I played before, but it's kind of the same because the layout's the same and the same characters, but it's completely different. Like, instead of doing all that, can we just like literally like use our eyes?
Well, what happened, I just from my own perspective, what happened with me and maybe why a preconceived definition I might have had that I just wasn't using at the time, maybe altered, is because I realized, thinking back, that there's some things that the reason that people dismiss remasters way more quickly than remakes is because a lot of the HD porting that's been going on over the past 15 years or whatever it's been, that people have been HD porting games, and like what happened is I started just dismissing it. Oh, it's just a port. Like, oh, it's an HD, but it's just a port. Like, and I was guilty of just dismissing. Like, that doesn't mean it's any less of a game per se, but it's just the same game in HD. It's just a port, and that's what a lot of people kind of look at with the remaster versus remake, where they devalue what a remaster is, because they have that mentality of, well, a lot of the games I saw growing up were just ports. They were just HD ports, and that's what people call the remaster.
Those were remasters.
Yeah, and I never called them remasters, and so but I understand. But I understand then that shows to me like your clear line in the sand of there's the remaster and then this is the remake. I get your clear line. It is extremely clear. It's crystal clear. But that's just not the way that people growing up right now are starting to view things.
I disagree with. I disagree with that. I think people are trying to make their own definitions now. What people are making? You're going to say me, but besides me. Well, you are, though, because when Devil May Cry would come out in these games were clearly remastered. That's what remasters were. There was a pretty clear definition. Hey, here's a remaster. We've improved the frame rate. We've improved the quality of the game. It's still the same game that you know and love, but we've improved it with this. It looks the same. It just runs at a higher resolution, sometimes a higher frame rate. You know what I'm saying? But they didn't completely change the models, completely change, the UI, completely change so many different things. So I don't think we should be changing stuff like that because the remasters have been around and had a clear definition of what they were. We have, and now all of a sudden we don't have a clear definition. I have a clear definition in terms of what I know. I'm not a developer, so I can't sit there and strip down the code and see everything. But I see enough remade that's clearly from my eyes remade to say, you know what? Yeah, this is definitely above and beyond what we've seen with the typical remaster. Because I have a ton of remasters. Heck, I have Devil May Cry.
But
I have Devil May Cry Trilogy. I have so many remasters that look exactly the same as they looked on previous systems, but they run a little bit better. They're sharper. They're in better resolution. But then Xenoblade comes around and the models look completely different. The UI looks completely different. They've completely changed a bunch of different things in there. They've added a whole new, the future connected thing. So that wasn't remastered from anything. They've added completely different things. It looks different enough. Gameplay, that's fine. Gameplay can be the same. Metal Gear Solid was like that. You know what I'm saying? Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes was like that. So who cares? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we've had gameplay that's the game was still remade.
Again, I think it just gets back to culture, how you grow up, how you view things, your personal opinions, and then people just redefining things to mean what they want it to mean. I mean, I hate using this example, but it's one that everyone can clearly know from the English language, like the word gay. It used to just mean happy. It's literally in a popular cartoon series intro song, have a gay old time. Like, that over time started shifting to a derogatory term. And now it's being recaptured as a positive term, but it doesn't mean exactly what it like the original word was clear in what it meant. And I think
it's context. No, hold up. It's context how you use it. You can say have a gay old time all you want to,
but nobody uses it that way anymore.
Nobody uses it that way anymore.
That's what I'm saying.
There was a time. The context is still the same.
Before me, there was a time before all of us probably watching when the transition from that word meaning just happy to meaning a slur at the time.
Even if you use it in today's day, it's not a slur in terms of how it is.
Have you ever seen anybody use it to mean happy?
No, because it's an old way of speaking.
That's what the word was. That was why the word was created.
That doesn't apply here because we've had many modern examples of exactly what I'm talking about, and now you could argue,
just like there was a transition period for that. We could be in a transition period now.
We're actually not in a transition period.
Well, look what's happening with remakes, though. They're getting a lot done to them now.
Okay, so did it just start now, or when did it start? When did this transition period start?
I don't get a chance to play every game out there, but I guess the first time that I saw that a remake really started going the extra mile was maybe the RE2 remake, or I guess that's the place where I probably first saw the remake started getting a lot more put into it.
I mean, but that's remakes a lot more put into it, but it's still not the clear definition of what we've had before. So you can say a lot more put into a remake. That doesn't discredit or change what a remake is. Reimagining should be more of the thing. If you guys want to say it shouldn't replace.
A reimagining is actually part of the definition of a remake, unfortunately. And that's where I get confused when I was reading all this stuff. Everyone, like the one thing, there was like basically two things that everyone agreed on in all the stuff I read. It's one, that remakes are just more important or a bigger deal than a remastering. And two, a reimagining, which is definitely I think we can all agree that's what Final Fantasy is. That's what some other games have been. Technically is also a remake because it fits the definition of remake. So it ends up getting to this point where now even remakes have like multiple tiers of what a remake is. And then that starts to become, I think, where you have a whole nother split.
Maybe, you know what maybe a cool thing to do would be? Instead of trying to label one thing because you don't feel it does enough, how about you just label it like how it's supposed to be based on the definition that we've always had?
But that's the definition that you have is based
that
on...
we've always had. We've always had the definition.
Okay, well, if I use it...
Why is it being pushed... Wait, hold up. Why is it being pushed aside because you feel that it's not enough?
My definition hasn't changed. But my definition has never changed. If it's reusing the code base, it's a remaster to me.
You don't know...
But you don't know that it's not.
But I can use my eyes and I can see.
You're
'cause we
talking
can't
about
strip
visual
down.
elements that aren't necessarily part of the code
Yeah,
base.
we
You're
can't
talking about
strip- We can't strip down code, Nate. We can't do it. So I look and I see, and I clearly
We
see
can do it.
remade things. I see plenty of things remade, and I use my eyes.
so
Okay?
we can't strip down code. That's why we can
So
data mine
your
stuff from
definition-
code because we can't strip it down.
We can't strip down and see it. You tried to claim that Shadow of the Colossus is a remaster of a remaster, and it's clearly not. So
I
your
don't know if it's a
definition-
remaster of the PlayStation 3
You're-
version, but I think
you're
they did
saying it's a
reuse code.
remaster of a
yes.
remaster.
I think they reused code, yeah.
So that means it's a remaster of a remaster.
Well, it depends if they reuse the slightly altered code of that remaster, or if they went back to the original code base and reused that. Because every remaster has altered code.
Why would they go back to the original code base? And
Because
remaster
maybe
that
when they brought in the
remastered it
PlayStation,
once?
no, because this is why. Because when they imported the PlayStation 3 code into the new engine, it didn't run as well as when they imported the original code.
See, now you're just speculating on things.
I'm talking about how game development works. I know this as someone who's done it. Like I know that's how it works.
The developers literally said that they remade the game. Now we can't trust developers on a remake. Now, is that what you're saying? If they say the game is remade, now we're saying that, well, we don't know. They might have used the you're telling me they used the PS2 code for the PS4? Is that what you're saying? Then what happened to all the work that they did with the graphics? The game looks so much better. What about all that work that they made remaking models and textures? All that's just imported?
You are confusing art and code. They are not the same. The graphic design people, the modelers are not the same thing as the actual code base the game runs on. You can have people remake art assets and not
code. It's clear that it's not that. It's clear that they had to do a lot of work with this game. I mean, like, the problem that I have that you're doing, Nate, is that, like, you're not...
All I know is
all I know is that they said it's a remake.
When I watch the videos, right? When I watch the videos out there, and yeah, there's some increased facial expressions and all that, clearly new additions to the game. But when I'm watching them running through the fields, when I'm watching the combat, like, it's all the same animations that they were using before, and those animations are in the code base, which means they copied over the code base. They just added in addition to that code base to get the extra animations and stuff on top. So and yeah, they altered the UI because that's a quality of life. Well, there's new code. There's new code in every game that's ported.
Okay, and they made new models.
Yeah, but that's got nothing to do with the code.
And they made new AI.
I didn't say they made new AI.
Or sorry, UI.
They changed the UI, yeah.
They changed, so they made new. It doesn't look the same. They created new UI.
Well, yeah, but it could be using the same code.
So they made new models. They made new UI.
You're talking all about art assets.
They made a bunch of new stuff.
This is why I asked you if they would have took the art and just made it completely look like the original game, but running in the new engine with the new content. Would you call it a remake? And then you started going on. It depends on this. It depends on that. And I'm just like,
I said that if they remade a bunch of stuff, then they remade it.
But everything you're talking about remaking is just art assets. So to you, it's just art assets.
It's not just art assets. It's 3D modeling, dude. It's not
3D
just
modeling is art. Literally, when you go into graphic design, it includes 3D modeling. It's art.
I understand that, but obviously there's new animations too that weren't in the original. So there's also animations as well, not just art.
I'm not saying they didn't add things to it.
But
what they added to it didn't fundamentally change the game.
And that's not the definition of a remake if it fundamentally changes the game or not, Nate. Shadow of the Colossus is not a
when a song is remade.
It's a remake.
When a movie is remade,
changed.
Hold on. When a song is remade, when a movie. But here's the thing.
Anymore.
If anything is remade in any other medium, it's different than the original, like completely different, not just visually.
That's not how it is in this medium. Shadow of the Colossus is proof.
So again, so we can agree. So we can agree that
Resident Evil is proof.
That your definition.
Twin Snakes is
hold
proof.
on. So we can agree that your
what
definition.
Are you talking about, bro?
That your definition is based on your experience and your personal opinion. Because a remake in every other medium is a brand new thing. And every other medium.
Gaming is not every other medium.
It's an entertainment medium.
We don't use this. But it's not every other medium. There's clearly things that happen in gaming that don't happen
in
other mediums.
There go the definition that has existed before gaming did anything.
I'm talking about the definition within what gaming is.
But the
What
definitions
we've
you were
established
using
here
for
in gaming.
the definition you were using for remaster is the exact definition that has been used by
Your,
music and
your
videos.
definition says that a game that's clearly a remake is a remaster.
Your definition is that an HD port is a remaster because that is what a remaster is, and that is what it is in music, and that is what it is in movies and
That's what the
everything else.
developers have stated what
But-
it is. Developers have clearly stated that if they increase the quality, that it's remaster. If they remake,
So
things,
here's
then it's a
the
remake.
problem. Why is the definition of a word changing depending on the medium?
It's not changing. You are taking an outside medium and trying to force feed it into gaming.
But how is it not changing then? Because if the outside mediums that were using it before video games, that was clearly defined what a remake was. Video games came along, and now the word doesn't mean what it means.
Video games are different. When you have a different medium, you do different things. What they do in movies is completely different than what they do in gaming. What they do in gaming in terms could be different in movies. You trying to force feed the definition from movies into this?
It doesn't have to be different. But why does it have to be different? Why does it have to be different? In movies, they restart from the ground up. Why can't that be what it is in gaming? Remake from the ground up.
Gaming is completely different. Because gaming is completely different than movies.
But why does the definition have to change when clearly there are games that are remaking from the ground up?
Gaming is completely different than movies, Nate. It's not the same. And we've had this same thing where you're literally retroactively saying these developers didn't.
I don't care what developers say. What developers say.
You don't care what they say.
No, okay. I don't, because they're marketing. If you hear any public word from them, it's all marketing speak. They're just marketing.
So developers have no say in this.
In how it's defined? They do with obviously fans that just listen to what they say and just go with it. Yeah, sure. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're right.
I find that ridiculous that you would sit there and say that developers have no say in this when they're the ones who are making the game.
Here's the deal. Did you know that the team that made Twilight Princess HD has a developer interview and they called it a remake? Is it a remake?
Okay. It's obviously a HD remaster.
So why does it matter what they say?
Because developers are the ones who make the game, and they make.
So then it's a remake. So you're just going if the developers say what it is. That's what it is.
First of all, I didn't see that, and once again,
it's okay if you didn't see it. It's fine.
I didn't see that, but once again, I agree to you to an extent. All I'm trying to say is that if a developer feels that it is something, we should at least give some credence to it when our eyes tell us one thing. I'm never telling you to deceive our eyes. You're saying, well, since the developer said that, I can use my eyes.
Sure.
I can look at Shadow of the Colossus and see that, this is a lot of changes. You are saying, oh, well, since the developer says it, it's that. No, I'm not saying. I use my eyes.
Sure.
And that's what I said to Conrad, and that's what I said to people. I can see.
And that's what and here's the thing. I use my eyes, too. With Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, bringing it all back around, I use my eyes. I compare trailers, compare footage. There's some new facial animations and stuff. Everything else, it looks pretty much the same, just prettier. My eyes tell me it's a remaster. What?
Your eyes tell you that it's completely the same, based off of what we've seen the models.
Again, the models are just. Again, you keep going back to art assets. Yes, they completely changed out the art assets. It doesn't mean it's a different game. And I know you're not saying it's a different game because your definition doesn't work that way. But that's the way it is for me. When I watched what's that recent? I hate bringing up. I'm not going to go back to the movies example again, but it was a movie example about like Hollow Man or whatever. I recently watched it was a remake of an old movie, but it was completely different. And I just view video games as the same way. I've always viewed it as a remake is you're taking something that used to exist and just completely remaking it and being in whatever fashion you want to remake it. Whereas a remaster to me is taking something that already exists and just building on top of it.
So what you're trying to tell me is that, technically, like I said, so you're on the belief that they remastered Shadow of the Colossus twice, and that Crash Bandicoot and all those games are just remastered. Those are all remastered, even though developers, they all say that they're remade. Everybody said that they're remade, but now because of the definition being changed in 2019 with Resident Evil, now they've changed, and now we're saying, no, those games aren't remade. Those games are now remasters. So what you're saying that we're retroactively
in terms
changing
of Crash
what happened.
And Spyro, I can't talk specifically about them because I haven't played any of them. I haven't played the originals, haven't played the remakes, remasters, whatever they're called. I haven't played them, so I feel sacrilegious as a gamer for me to admit that, but I didn't play those back in the day when I was a kid. But I didn't. I was a strictly Nintendo gamer. Didn't play those things. Didn't buy them when they came back out again. Didn't have any interest for me. And I realized Spyro, I think, was on Nintendo before. I just never dabbled in it. I mean, a lot of it comes down, again, I think, to just personal experience. This is what it's always been for you, so that's what you view it as. I didn't experience some of these games. I didn't experience it that way. A lot of my experiences with ports, remasters, whatever, remakes are all probably within the last, I don't know, 8 years that I've even paid attention. Not even, maybe like the last 4, because before I did Nintendo YouTube stuff, I was a Zelda guy. I literally just covered Zelda games for 20 years. I played other games. I didn't really think that deeply about them. I just played them and enjoyed them. Kind of miss those days sometimes. When I was just a gamer, you didn't really care about anything else. Besides Zelda, I always had a deep dive into Zelda. And now that, I'm this Nintendo YouTuber and I have to deep dive into even topics like this, like I've had this discussion, I think, one other time during a live stream. And I think it just leads to the only thing I ever get out of the discussion is how frustrated I am that people even care if it's called a remake or a remaster in the first place. Who really cares? Maybe the developer, maybe there's a personal pride thing as a developer, but if you're a fan looking at a game, you shouldn't dismiss it if you think it's a remaster. But you shouldn't dismiss it if it's a remake. You should just look at what it is. Do you like it? Cool, play it.
And I agree. I'll get to donations in just a bit once we get towards the end, guys.
Yeah, I've had a couple.
And I agree. In terms of we should just play the game, and yeah, I think developers will do that. But like I said, the problem that I have is like this: we're starting to revision things, and I'm definitely not gonna let my audience think this nonsense because so many of them ask me the same thing that comes here with this, like, oh well, it must be a remaster because Final Fantasy did this and Resident Evil did this, completely ignoring literally decades and decades of work and stuff that's gonna happen in the future. It's not just from 2019 and on. It's not just from there. There's game 2020, like Panzer Dragoon. That's remake. Panzer Dragoon remake. I didn't hear zero people questioning whether this was a remake or not based off the gameplay first play.
Is that a popular game? I'm just wondering.
Panzer Dragoon, it's a niche audience.
Because I think sometimes with some of those games you don't hear it just because they're not that popular, so people aren't talking about them. So they just don't care. Like Xenoblade, people care. People care about Xenoblade because it's Switch exclusive, and we just had a 1.5 million plus of Xenoblade 2 sell, so it's actually a decent sell.
1.73 was the last time.
Last update,
yeah. But I mean, I think that, like I said, it's being used in a certain way.
We have to consider this. We are in a quarantine situation where everything's being pushed back, and we have nothing else to talk about. So people are just debating pointless things as well on the internet right now.
But it's a good but I think it's a good debate. There's nothing wrong with people saying that this is useless or whatever. You guys are here watching. What are you talking about? If it's useless, then go away.
I think they're just here to see us go at each other. That's all.
That's fine. But if it's useless, then
entertainment.
I mean,
entertainment value.
It's entertainment for you guys. So people say, "Is this useless?" Okay, this up and watch something else. All right, we're creating entertainment for you guys. So chill.
My first video this week. Come on.
Yeah, and on top of that, I haven't gotten heated. I haven't yelled at Nay. I haven't done anything.
If you guys ever saw our last debate over the EA Nintendo thing, that's a heated debate.
Yeah,
we got pretty heated, but we were all cool by the end because we're friends, and that's whatever. But like it got heated. There was some passionate arguing both ways. That's why we're just discussing.
We're simply discussing. Yeah. And sometimes we shake our head or we go like this or whatever.
Yeah. It's just like this again.
but that's not a problem. So for the people that are just saying this is pointless, then feel your ass somewhere else.
I do this with Eric.
If you're watching, just relax and watch it, enjoy the content, and pick a side, do whatever you want to do.
And that's what my friends do when they have a discussion and they disagree on stuff.
Yeah, like
if you ever watch like the Nintendo Prime podcast, Eric and I disagree all the time, and we're just all shaking our heads. He's literally sitting next to me, and we're just shaking our heads, and he's getting ready to slap me, and I'm getting ready to hit him in my hat, and we're just friends, just talking. It happens. You don't have to agree on everything in life.
So what I'm trying to say here is like basically, I mean, kind of get to this. I think that the definition should definitely keep the same as we've had the definition, and we're gonna see more of this in the future. I think that these particular examples of stuff that, like, let's say Resident Evil or whatever the case, where they sometimes even remove stuff from what they had before, they add in certain things. You can still have different types of remakes. You can completely have, and I think that's where, like, it'd probably be a little more inclusive. You can have different types. A game can be the exact same and be remade with a bunch of remade things in the game, but still have stuff that's similar and still be considered a remake, like we've always had it before. Remake is not a new term.
Is a much broader definition for you than a remaster is.
Absolutely, because we're starting to see quite a number of different things with these remakes, like Final Fantasy VII. Reimaginings, reboots, whatever the case is, where they completely take a story or what happened. I think Tomb Raider was another one of those games. They
Yeah,
took the
Tomb Raider was
original,
the
you know,
original reboot remake thing.
original story and just completely do things differently.
That
So
was a
the fact that
franchise reboot, I think they called that one.
yeah, a franchise reboot. So you can take something, you can say, hey, we're going to remake it or reboot it this way, or we're going to remake it, we're going to keep it faithful, and then add a bunch of stuff in there, make it look way better. There's a lot more things that you can do because it's not just a simple remaster. I think that anybody can sit there and you can use your eyes and you can see that, Xenoblade, Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, all these games do a bit more than what Devil May Cry does. Devil May
Yeah.
Cry 2 on the Wii, on the Switch, right? Look at Devil May Cry 2. Is that to the level of what they did? Are there new models in there? Did they do a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of, it's the same game, it looks the same, it's a shiny PS2 game, you know what I'm saying? There's nothing. Dante looks just as crappy as he did on the PS2 with Devil May Cry. They didn't do anything much when it comes to that game. They did a little bit more with Devil
Yeah.
May Cry 3 Special Edition, but it definitely does not look drastically different, when it comes to like Xenoblade. So there's definitely levels of it to it, and I think it should be broad. There definitely should be like, hey, yo, there's a lot of stuff remade in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a remake. Yo, they completely reimagined everything. That's how I saw it. I didn't see it as an exclusion tactic, which many people are seeing it as, well, since they didn't do
Yeah.
this, that means this is a problem, and that's a remaster now. And it's like, wait a minute. In years past, it never was a remaster. Hold up, Metal Gear Solid didn't do much. I mean, better graphics, game looks good, added a couple different things. That's a remake. Nobody said it was a remaster. Nobody said that.
I guess
mean,
the problem for me is a lot of your definitions for remaster I've separated out as not even being a remaster, just being a port, an HD port, or just a port in general. You're just bringing it to a new platform.
yeah, but an HD port and a remaster are the same thing.
But I don't view them as the same thing. Never have.
Why?
Because again, literal definition of remaster in other mediums would apply here, where it would be considered to be a remaster. And this is where I get in a problem because I was trying to use a literal definition for remake to show why it doesn't, why I think some things are remasters that you don't. But I think remasters can be
HD,
broader.
You increase the quality. Remaster, you increase the quality. Like if a game was non HD,
Yes,
and it became HD,
by pure
and increased
definition
the
of
quality,
remaster,
that's a remaster, right?
based on how remaster has been used in other mediums, you are correct. And I think the problem is if I'm going to take what I used to separate out as ports and just say those are remasters, okay, then to me the definition of remaster is much bigger and broader than you view it as.
Remasters have just been ports with upgrades.
We're on the opposite ends of the spectrum where you view remakes as having a much broader spectrum. I view remaster as having a broader spectrum. Honestly, they both cross each other, and I know we've already said like ultimately,
yeah,
it doesn't. I don't think it matters. I'm just being completely honest. When you said you wanted to debate today, I was like, sweet, we haven't done that in a while. That's the first thought that came to my mind. It wasn't like, oh man, I'm gonna get player essence today. It's just like. I don't think it matters. Like it.
Oh, it doesn't. But it's a good discussion.
Yeah, I don't know. It matters to gamers, I guess.
Absolutely.
It's never mattered to me.
Discussion.
It's never mattered to me. This is how I've always defined it. This is how it's always been to me. I've always separated ports out. Fine, you want to throw ports in with it. Doesn't really matter to me. Remaster has the broader definition, and remake has the narrower definition because it's really narrow in every other medium but video games. Then remaster is really wide in other mediums.
What games were remakes before this new age of your thinking? What games were remakes?
Oh man, putting me on the spot here because I played a lot, mostly just Nintendo stuff growing up.
Well, you can look and you just from your eyes, right? Because you're saying that you're looking at Xenoblade and you're saying, "Well, I see it, and it's remastered. It's not remade." So,
yeah.
So what games are remakes based on your definition?
I'm trying to think back on Nintendo games I played that were remade that I felt was a remake. Because I didn't feel. Nintendo didn't do a lot of that stuff in the early days.
Well, any.
But I didn't play the other stuff, so it's hard for me to come up with examples when I didn't play them. That's the problem. Like you have a wider gaming knowledge than I do on all systems. Because I didn't own a PlayStation 1, didn't own a PlayStation 2. I literally was Nintendo only until Xbox 360 came out. And then I didn't even own that for most of the gen. And then I have a PlayStation 3 back here, but I barely played anything on it. I got it just to play MLB The Show, basically. So
I don't see. This might be time to change your definition of what a remake is. Can't think of a single thing.
well, no, it just means that when I was younger, I didn't play games that I felt were remakes.
Well, I'm just talking. I mean, you know gaming, so I'm just saying like pick a game before this whole thing that is by your definition a remake. Then
Um,
I know you know gaming. I mean, you've been on this podcast. You talk gaming all the time.
yeah, I know. Just gotta talk gaming all the time. This is where people start to call me a fraud. Just gotta talk gaming all the time doesn't mean I have time to play games all the time. I'm a father of 3, stay-at-home dad. I'm homeschooling. Like, I don't have time to game, if I'm being completely honest. Only game I've played in the last month has been on Animal Crossing, so
I know. I'm just
it's okay. The other people have called me a fraud before because like I don't have all this time to game, and it's like I'm sorry.
I've been called a fraud.
It's like, I don't, I wish I would have like literally one of the things I'm excited for with PlayStation 5 is that all the PlayStation 4 games are supposedly backwards compatible. So finally, I'll actually play all the PlayStation 4 games since I never owned one. And so like honestly, this next gen coming up with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 are the first time I'm actually going to be trying to play a whole bunch of stuff, a wider variety than Nintendo. So like when I think back on Nintendo hasn't actually done a lot of remakes when I was growing up. And even when I think of now, like I still don't consider most of what they make as remakes.
Are you what about like Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver? Those were remade.
Yeah, here's the problem with Pokemon. I stopped playing after Gen 2, so.
But you can use your eyes.
I can, but I didn't even look at them. I didn't look at them back then, and I haven't looked at them now. Because again, I was just doing Zelda back then, so it was the games I wanted to play, and then Zelda. I didn't pay attention to the news on anything else.
This might be a perfect time. I'm telling you, Nate, this might be a perfect time for you to change your definition.
But I can't change my definition on experiences.
You couldn't think of a single game, my man. I can give you plenty of games that people at the time said that were remade, and we don't have this revisionist history.
But I'm not revising my history. I don't have examples because I didn't consider things to be remakes.
You don't have any history, but you're going back and saying that games that you never really called remasters. I don't think you did, but maybe you did. Maybe you
I didn't really use those terms, to be honest.
You didn't really use any terms, but now you're saying based on what you think now, those are remasters. So you're basically it's revisionist because at the time those weren't called remasters.
It's revisionist. It's revisionist to the people
separated.
It's revisionist to people who already had their set definitions. It's not revisionist to me. I'm not changing.
Then that's ignorance, then, right? If you're not willing to look at how things were done in the history, and you're saying, "Well, I didn't have that, so therefore I'm going to think this way," that's called ignorant, is it not?
We're just talking about the definition of terms. I don't know.
No, well, we're talking about you're saying, well, you have no experience with some of this stuff. And now you're saying, well, my experience is now in what this is done. Well, when somebody tells you, well, this is how it was done before, you say, well, no, that's not my definition. Well, I thought about it this way. Even though you had no experience.
Bring up a game bring up a game from like the early 2000s that you think was a popular remake at the time that I would recognize.
Pokemon, Heart Gold, Soul Silver.
Okay. The only reason I might consider that a remake is because this is just what I've been told. Me just looking at it, the visuals are different. Looks like the same game to me, but
it is.
They added a bunch of stuff apparently that was from other generations into it. I heard, or was that a later Pokemon remake? I can't remember.
They added a bunch of stuff, but it's the same core gameplay that we've gotten.
Yeah. So to me, it'd be a remaster. I would have called that a remaster back then.
You would have called it, but it's clearly a remake of the game, and that's how everybody sees it. It's clear it's not the same.
You want to know what's a Pokemon remake to me? Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee.
Those are remakes. Yeah, those are also. But that's
remakes. The first time I consider a Pokemon game to actually be a remake. All the other ones, I think they're just milking and remastering.
I don't think you played Pokemon's Heart Gold. People consider it one of the best in terms of remakes out there. Fire Red, Leaf Green, they also did that as well, where they added a bunch of stuff into the game. Same core gameplay, but they added a bunch of stuff
from over the years. They added it.
They added a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so, and that's why I said it's hard for me to speak because I didn't play the games. I fell out of love with Pokemon, so I didn't like a lot of the new stuff. So I don't really care if they added the
Yeah.
new stuff in. So to me, it's hard for me to try to look at it objectively, I guess, in this case, because I don't have the experience with it. Just looking at it from the outside looking in, it looks like a remaster to me. But
it's definitely.
but this also
a remake,
this kind of goes into what something
It's definitely a
that
remake, though.
Conrad I think said on Twitter, where you said I can see with my eyes that it's this, and he said, well, I need to experience it to know. And I think this is the situation here. With my eyes, that looks like a remaster to me. But if I play it, I might feel it's a remake instead.
See, that's weird. One, I would say that's weird because usually remakes, like what we've had before, you can clearly tell. When I looked at Metal Gear Solid, I was like, yo, this is a remake. When I looked at Resident Evil 1, I was like, yo, this is a remake. I don't think there really is any blurring of lines here. I think you guys are, like I said, you guys are creating your definition and being ignorant to the past, because now you're saying, well, that's not a remake. I would call that a remaster when everybody called it a remake. It was literally, the game was literally remade for the new system.
Just a question.
So, like,
I have a question.
I find this. Hold up. That's the reason why I say this is revisionist history.
But is it
because
when you were
guys
younger?
Are ignoring stuff.
When you were
saying,
younger,
well,
were you using those terms at all, or were you just playing games before you did?
When I was younger,
any YouTube, anything. On the playground, were you having those debates?
Absolutely. When I saw a game and it was completely new graphics and everything like that, yo, this game is remade for this system. I called it remake.
Oh my god, that wasn't even a debate that happened around it. We just said, man, that game looks good. That's all.
I said it looks cool, but we just said, yo, the game is being remade with new graphics, with completely new things. It was a remake. It was the developers in the magazine said, yo, we're remaking this game for this system with updated visuals and all this stuff like that.
Just a different childhood experience. When I was a kid and I was talking to people, we never used the term remakes or remasters. It just wasn't even a thing that crossed our mind. Because for a lot of us, if it's a remake or a remaster, we probably didn't play the game the first time around. So what are we even talking about? Because we don't have the knowledge.
I played it.
Now,
well, I mean, because so many people played Metal Gear. Like Metal Gear was.
Yeah, it was a big deal back then.
It was a big deal. So then when it was being remade, a lot of people played Metal Gear.
Yeah.
Metal Gear.
I was one of the few that did. Everyone on the playground played it.
But many people played Metal Gear. Yeah. So when we saw Twin Snakes, we all said, we didn't say this is a remaster or this is the re-release. We all said, yo, this game is being remade for the GameCube. When we saw, Resident Evil 1, people played Resident Evil 1 on the PS1. That was a popular game.
Yep.
And then we saw it on the GameCube. Yo, this game is remade for the GameCube. Like, this is not
I guess
a new
it just
concept,
wasn't terminology that I used as a kid. Back then, we just said, we just looked at it as, man, this game looks so much. It would be, oh man, this game's now on GameCube. Was on PlayStation 1. Look how much better this thing it looks like on GameCube compared to that. It was all about graphics and visuals and just eye candy and being like, man, this game looks amazing.
Nate, but that's just a play of words in terms of things. One of your friends could at least said, yo, they're remaking the game for the GameCube. But nobody said that?
No.
You're trying to tell me that nobody said they're remaking the game?
No, they just said they're bringing, hey, did you hear that Resident Evil's coming over to GameCube with better visuals?
Y'all didn't have a dictionary back then? Like, you couldn't use the common term of a remake? Like, a remake is it's not like a very weird word to use when you're talking about things.
But again, this goes back to remake, and every other medium has a very definite line on what a remake is. And in gaming, you have a much broader definition of what it is. Growing up, we didn't have that broad definition. It was just, this game's coming to this platform, it just looks better than it did on the other platform. And by your definition, just that basis of an argument alone, that could just be a remaster. That's not saying that it is a remaster. I don't have the personal knowledge to have that conversation for that game. No. But it's just it's
based on my definition, with graphics and models completely remade, right? Which is what's happening with Xenoblade. Even though gameplay is similar, same thing with Metal Gear. Movement and gameplay was similar, but the graphics were completely remade. My definition has stayed true throughout this whole thing. It's your definition and many of these revisionist people online that are taking it and creating their own because of Final Fantasy VII Remake and because of other things, or they have no history. They don't know they don't know the history and say, well, I just called it whatever I wanted to call it. And then now you guys are trying to make this is what it is. Yet you're, like I said, being ignorant to what it actually was at that time. That's all I'm trying to say. Being ignorant to what it was at that time.
And the easy argument coming into gaming is I could argue that you're being ignorant to what the term remake has always meant before games came around. So why do we have to change it for games? We don't
I'm
have
not
to
being-
change it for games.
I'm not being ignorant to that. I'm not being ignorant.
But you
to
dismiss
that.
it every
Since
time I bring
game-
up other mediums that do it completely differently, and they do it exactly the same across different mediums. We get to gaming, suddenly now the definition broadens out, when a lot of that definition would be what a remaster is in all these other mediums.
Because gaming, how you interact with gaming is completely different than how you interact with movies. It's not that it's being
What's a personal
dismissed,
interaction? Yeah.
but it's maybe if you're playing The Last of Us, maybe you can say that's the same. But if you're talking about actual games, that was a joke for the people in the chat.
Yeah.
If you're talking about actual games,
I was like, be careful then. I'm careful. Last of Us Part 2 coming up. Be careful.
I'm gonna get the game. If you're talking about actual games, it's a completely different way in terms of how developers do things. It's a completely different medium, how you interact, how you play it. It's physical. It's more than just what movies did. Movies didn't have a physical.
I look
touch
at it
aspect to
also
There was
that,
more to
then
it.
how I
you know?
interact with it should be different if it's a remake. If I'm interacting the same way with the same gameplay, it's not different.
It's being remade.
It just looks different. It just looks different.
But it's still being remade to look. Remake doesn't mean it means mechanically changed everything, and that's where your definition is wrong. The fact
But that's
that
what remake
means
means in every other medium. Why are we changing it for gaming?
If there was a movie that looked like crap, okay, and then it was remade to have way better visual animations and everything like that, or visual. Maybe the animations were the same. That's still a remake of a movie. You can call that a remake because they remade the movie. So if you want to sit there and put this movie thing in there, if they took a crappy looking version of a movie and made it the exact same, but it looked way better, you can say, yo, the movie was remade. It's still the same movie, but it was remade.
If it's the exact same movie, but it just looks better, it's a remaster.
You can call it a remake, though. They remade the movie. They used different processing techniques. They use different things to make the movie. If you want to call it a remaster, that's fine. You can call it a remaster. But usually what I see is like, let's say Bad Boys on Blu-ray and Bad Boys on DVD. Yo, it's been remastered to run in higher resolution. Still looks the same, but it's been remastered to run in a higher resolution.
But if you're going to remake Bad Boys, it'd be completely different than the original Bad Boys.
I understand that, but if you're looking at it from a point in terms of gaming, since you want to bring gaming and try to put everything to it, gaming, we've had the definition, or we've had it to where it can be the same game.
I guess.
Yet it looks way better.
I don't like altering definitions.
If
in
you
my
want to
world
have
of entertainment,
it's not an alter of a definition.
But you're saying that it can't apply to gaming the same way because gaming's different, which means you have to alter the definition of what it means for everything. Well, you don't have to alter what it means for movies and TV and games or what, but you're altering what it means when you bring it to a different medium. Whereas I'm just like, this is what a remake is to me. Period. I don't need to change its definition depending on what I'm doing. A remake is a remake.
But you're basing it off of movies, which is completely
because
different.
I grew up with movies and music, and they existed before video games, and they set the standards for what a remake and a remaster is.
But they set the standards in their own medium.
But the standards are the same.
Medium.
But the standards are the
They're
same.
not exactly the same, clearly, because games aren't made the same way as movies. So why are the standards the same?
Music isn't made the same way as movies, but the standards are the same.
But music and movies aren't the same thing as games. Gaming is a completely
And music is
different
not the same thing as a movie. What's your point? They still use the same definitions.
My point
the definition
is that
doesn't change.
My point is that your bootleg definition has not been the case since we've been doing remakes, and you're trying to slam it in here because Final Fantasy and other games came out.
But hasn't been the case
yourself,
to who?
You
hasn't been the case to who? But who? Hasn't it been the case to?
Bro, Nate, you have not named a single game that was a remake that you can think of before 2019.
Because I don't
So there's been 0 remakes, in your opinion, until 2019.
That's a lack of knowledge. That ignorance you brought up.
You gotta come to a debate with knowledge. You can't sit here and tell me, well, I don't know, so there's no remakes in your... Because the movie said this.
I never said there weren't remakes back then. I defined what I consider a remake to be.
Name a remake before 2019.
Let me get the old Google out here.
No, don't Google it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I already admit. You should know.
You
should know. Name one. Just give me some remakes. Give me a couple. Give me three so I can see your point. If you can't name one, your definition's trash, bruh.
No, because the definition's not based on the game. The definition is based on what the word means. This is what a remake is.
I'm sorry. I called your definition trash.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, let me just.
I know what you meant. I didn't take it that way. You're okay. I mean, the fans are probably going nuts right now.
No, everyone's like, all right. I called your definition trash. Your definition is misguided because you can't name a single game.
Because it's not based on the games. It's based on what the definition of remake means in every other medium I experience it in. There are probably remakes in my past that I can't think of and I don't remember. And this is the problem. Here's the problem.
That's a bad definition. Wouldn't you say if you come to a debate and you can't name a single game from your past, Nate, you're a seasoned gamer. I don't want to hear this. I don't know stuff, Nate. I don't want to hear it.
So
you're better than that?
OJ?
You're better than that?
OJ.
Yes, sir.
Two things to explain here. Because normally I completely agree with you. One, obviously, I had no time to prepare because I'm homeschooling my kids all day. So this debate, I got to check out some articles on my phone while I'm being a teacher, so it's not really the greatest way to research anything. And two, I don't know if you're aware of this. I try not to talk about it publicly anymore. I did suffer a traumatic brain injury last year, so my memory doesn't actually work that well. So I honestly don't even remember most of my childhood right now.
Okay, let me tell you. Okay,
that's why I can't recall things.
Did you forget what the definition of a remake was because of your memory?
No,
I'm just messing with you.
I just looked up. Well, no, it's. And I don't want to use. This is the thing. I don't mention it because I don't want to bring it up as an excuse. I know some people could tell sometimes when I'm off on certain things I'm talking about that maybe I used to be more on about. And I try not to talk about it because it's more of a personal thing. But and I'm in recovery and things are what they are right now. It's a little difficult with all the COVID crap going on because I can't go in. But,
I got you, man.
But that's besides the point. That's why I'm literally trying to rack my brain and I'm drawing up like blanks, like anything before last year. It's like I don't know why I'm drawing blanks, other than that I draw blanks on a lot of things in my life. Apparently not on having children, but that's a whole different thing.
Okay, well, I mean, look.
So
I mean, and I think
I'm sorry that I feel unprepared. I am unprepared. I will admit.
It's fine. It's fine. That's why I tried to get it. That's why I tried to right away. So, and I know you have kids and all that stuff. I mean, I didn't really take too much time preparing because.
Well, you don't need to. You have the knowledge. I remembered you have the whole stuff. Knowledge just sitting there. Yeah.
So I mean, like, maybe hopefully in this discussion, I think we can clearly see that if we can't name a single game, and I'm trying to think of it way, like, let me think about games before in the past. I'm pretty sure there are some games that completely changed mechanically to fit your definition. But I think the issue is that those weren't separated from what, like Pokemon Heart Gold Soul Silver or Resident Evil or, these other games that came out that were just considered remakes. Like they were all remakes, they were all remade or, whatever.
Yeah, like I think the earliest game I can remember, but it's not, I don't even consider it a remake. It was like Jurassic Park back in the day. But like I think that was even a remaster. So I can't think of one that right now that I would consider to be a remake. I mean, I know that there's been Pokemon remakes, but then I didn't partake, so it's hard for me to talk about them. Until Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, I partook in that one. Yeah, I'm like, that's clearly a remake.
Yeah, which was 2018. 2018 for that one. So definitely a remake. They said it was a remake.
Well, I didn't really care what they said. It just.
Well, our eyes tell us that it's Pokemon Yellow. And we see that the graphics are greatly improved. We see that the gameplay
and the mechanics are a little different.
They changed the Pokeball, but the
Pokemon are in the overworld now, instead of being random encounters.
Well, that's just models that are that's just the mechanics.
But random encounters were like the big thing when Pokemon first came out, and that's the first game that it wasn't random. You knew what you were gonna fight or what you were gonna capture.
Outside of, I guess like Pokemon, like Let's Go, or not Let's Go, Pokemon Go. That if you're counting
Pokemon Go, that's which where the idea kind of came from,
But the general core gameplay was still the same. It was still base battles back and.
Well, that's also a Pokemon where it's been the same the whole time. Like they add new mechanics, but it's the same core gameplay behind every Pokemon game. But that doesn't mean,
Okay.
you know, like when you bring up the model thing in like Smash Bros, like, yeah, but if it's in a new Smash Bros game, it's clearly a new game just because it reuses animations and models.
I think there might be some confusion on my end, or at least maybe Ronald thinks that there's confusion. I have a clear definition for what a remake is. I have a clear definition. There's not a, and I've been saying what a remake is. If I see a number of changes in terms of the model that's remade, models are remade, textures are remade, music is remade. There's a number of remakes with it. It's not just the game that's smoother looking and HD and better frame rate. If I see a number of things that are remade and enhanced and fixed in the game that's clearly different from the other one, like Metal Gear Solid, like Shadow of the Colossus, like these games that we've had that are remakes, it's a remake to me. That's what it is. It is a remake to me. I have a very clear definition, and my definition holds true to pretty much any game, whether it's old or whether it's new. You can say, hey, Final Fantasy VII, you're using these characters, but they're completely remade and completely redone. Hey, look at this game, Xenoblade. It's this game, but there's completely new models, completely new UI, completely new content.
My definition can hold the old games too. Even if I can't think of examples right now, I don't need examples because maybe then there just wasn't remakes back then. I'm not saying that's the case because I don't remember.
But there was. See, that's the problem though. But I'm looking at it from your point of view.
Okay, from my point of view, then, okay, you're the knowledge base. From my point of view, what old games would fit my definition?
It's hard to think of much, but the only thing I think somebody mentioned, somebody in the chat mentioned something in terms of yours, because you have to completely change the gameplay completely for it to be a remake, which remakes didn't do that back then. They wanted to get people to know that, hey, this is the game that you know and love, but we're making it much better graphics and stuff like that. So it's hard for me to think of really anything too much. I mean, I can't even really think of anything because your definition is so cloudy, and so.
But it's not cloudy. A remake is rebuilding a game from the ground up. Period.
Okay, but we're not developers. But we're not developers, so we can't all peer into code and know what's changed and how much it's changed. And on top of that, you said if it's remade from the ground up. I mean, so what? The whole everything completely is so basically no games that I can think of completely remake everything to where the gameplay is not the same that are old. It's hard for me to think of games like that because most games that were remade, they wanted to take the same core base game and then give you even something better, build on top of that. You know, we didn't look into the code and we didn't see all of that. We just said, hey, look, like this is what it is. You know, the game is obviously looking a lot better. And games look like this game looks way better. There's improvement. It looks a lot better. The UI's changed. Blah, blah, blah. We said this is a remake. It was remade. Now your definition is saying, well, if they take over the game, it's ported.
In my entire life, anything that's just looked prettier but it's the same game is a remaster. It doesn't matter how much prettier it looks or how much effort was put into the prettiness of it. That's just effort. It's still, why does the effort level change suddenly what the definition is? It shouldn't. If it's prettier because they just HD'd the current assets or they put brand new assets in, it's still the same concept. They're just making the game look prettier.
It's not quite the same when it's completely new, when they remake models. That's the whole point of like remaking. They remake things, right? You remake things. So if you're remaking a bunch of things,
but to me,
not just remastering.
But that's the thing. My remake is about the
taking
whole
what you have and then making it look better. Remaking is taking what you have and saying, well, that's what it looks like. Here's what we want it to look like now. And we're going to remake it.
But that's the thing.
There's a clear difference, Nate.
But
your definition, my remake, your definition's garbage. I'll be honest. Like
it's clear.
It's kind of garbage.
It's clear cut though. You're just talking about specific things.
You can't name a game.
But dude, I'm talking about.
You literally just said right now that there's no games that fit your I can't think of a game that. Yeah, I can bring up countless examples of games that were considered remakes by developers, by journalists, by people. But now all of a sudden, none of that is that because we can't think of anything. If you have to think that hard to find out if a game is a remake, no, we do. Because I can't think of anything. We're talking about old games, guys. We're talking about
because maybe they weren't remakes then.
But they were.
Just because they called them that doesn't make them remakes.
So that means your definition of remake, based on what you're saying right now,
rebuilt from the ground up.
Hasn't been anything at this point until what you think, until 2019, like Resident Evil or 2018.
No, there's probably been games before that too. I just can't think of them right now.
And if you can't think of them, maybe that definition's a problem. That's all I'm trying to say. If you
Or
can't
your
think of
broad
them,
in definition of that word is a problem. Because right now the
it's
difference
not a
is
problem.
the difference is
Because
my
nobody had a problem back then.
my remastering definition is broad. Your remake definition is broad.
No. Nobody had a problem back then. There was no problem
In
with
your
Crash
circle
There
of
was
people.
no pro-
In
There
your
was no
circle of
problem
people.
online. There was no problem online. There was no.
There
problem
was
with
barely any
anything.
online back in the early 2000s and late 90s.
Oh, there was.
I was
definitely
there. I
Game
was
Boy.
there on GeoCities
was
running
there.
a website way back in 1997.
Hey, I was there. There was no, and you know what? There was no problem up until Xenoblade. There was no problem, but in 2018 with Crash Bandicoot Spiral, when people calling those remakes and the game plays exactly the
But
same.
here's the
there was
thing.
no problem with Shadow of the Colossus. There was no problem with Metal Gear. Now there's a problem.
You say that because it's just what you're hearing in your circle. I've heard people debate this on every single one of those games you've mentioned.
I haven't heard a single person debate if Spyro is a remake or a remaster. In terms of everybody called it a remake for the most part.
I've had people debate that with me.
Well, those people don't know what they're talking about then, if that's the case, because
But
Final
that's
Fantasy
based
VII
on
is
your
definitely
definition.
affected.
Your definition.
And their definition is very
My
much like yours.
Yeah, my definition
Which
is like clear cut. That's literally what every medium uses. And if you want to change it for
name
gaming,
a game.
then it doesn't matter if the old games are that way.
If you can't name a game in the 30, 40 years of us having that, and there's been clear remakes, developers can tell you that there's been clear remakes. If you can't name a single game, I'm sorry, that's not a good definition.
But your definition includes so much stuff in the term remake. Mine is just the opposite. It includes so much stuff in a remaster. It does, though.
It really doesn't.
Yeah, because you're basically saying, what besides a port with new visuals is a remaster to you?
Name a game, and I can tell you instantly if it's a remake or a remaster based on what I look at. Go ahead, name a game.
The Wind Waker HD.
Remaster. Same base game, they remastered it. So Twilight Princess, remastered.
Funny
Tokyo
about the Wind Waker HD. Hold on, the Wind Waker HD actually had half of its models redone and was built in a completely new engine. I still consider that a remaster.
But it was still remastered.
But
the models literally look the same too. They've got better shading and textures and stuff like that, but the basic artwork in terms of looking at it looks exactly the same. There is a far greater difference with Xenoblade, and I think we can all determine that.
Sure,
we all can see
there's a greater difference in Xenoblade. The art assets are obviously much better, but we're also talking about a game that
art assets are actually remade completely.
But yeah, and over half the art assets in the Wind Waker HD were remade completely.
Half models in Xenoblade are completely new.
I understand that.
Okay.
Although some could be ported from Torna.
What were they ported from? Ported from what?
Like grass textures and stuff like that.
The grass textures were ported from Torna?
I'm just saying that some things they probably didn't necessarily make from the ground up. The developers reuse assets all the time.
Okay, but they're remaking the original game. They're not remaking Torna.
Oh my gosh.
So if they're building the game but then using new assets and using new stuff, not the original.
But if they're not remaking assets, though, they're just using assets they already have laying around.
It's the game that they're remaking. Even if they have those assets, that's fine. They can use those assets to remake an original game.
The point I was trying to make with the Wind Waker HD, because of the knowledge I remember on that game and how it was developed and all that stuff, and the reason they were making that as a precursor to Breath of the Wild development for the Zelda team. The reason I bring that up is because it fits a lot of the things you're saying. It just doesn't have different enough models.
It actually. It
has a different UI, completely different UI.
But it doesn't. Not really, but okay.
It does. It's completely different. Completely different from the GameCube. It is.
Completely different UI. Okay, and that's fine. But the game looks. It's clearly.
But it looks the same. There's a difference between the art styles. That's the problem. The original Wind Waker on GameCube already looked really, really good because of the type of art style it is, and it ages very well. Xenoblade Chronicles art style does not age well. I think we can all agree it doesn't age well. Some people thought it was blurry and a muddy mess back then, let alone looking at it through the lens of it being 2020 now. Obviously, games look so much better than that. Even people thought that was Xenoblade Chronicles 2, that was kind of a muddy mess, and now we see what that engine can do once it's had more work and more time put into it. I don't agree with that. But I'm saying that it's an art style difference. If they basically, if the Wind Waker would have been put into, say,
I already told him Resident Evil.
I don't know, like some a different art style that didn't age as well. And then all of a sudden, when they brought it to thing and they replaced the models, all of a sudden it looked just so much better. The difference you're talking about is an art style. The art style of Xenoblade needed much more improving upon than the one from Wind Waker, but they still remade the models. Just because it takes more effort to make that particular art style of models shouldn't change the definition. That's why I brought up the Wind Waker HD, because it's
You're
different.
bringing up the Wind Waker. What they're
That's
doing
why I
is
brought
they
it up,
didn't
because
completely-
I think it's a
they didn't
remaster. We agree it's a remaster, but for completely
They didn't
different
completely
reasons.
They didn't completely remake the models.
They did, though. They factually did
You
remake
just said it's 50%
over 50%, I said.
over, but it's not completely.
So? Do you think
Xenoblade is completely new models with the characters.
all
It's
the
not same
all the
models.
characters have new models in Wind Waker?
Have you seen them? Have you seen the models?
Yes.
They've been releasing
Yes.
them. All the main characters have brand new models.
Yes, all the main characters in the Wind Waker had brand new models as well. That's what I'm trying to bring up.
50%.
Yeah, the reason that 50% of the art assets in the game is what I'm talking about.
The game was remastered, Nate. You know it. You're trying
Yes,
to fandangle.
yes, it
fandangle
is.
in that-
No, I'm angling that it had the same effort put into it
You're trying to
as
say
Xenoblade
my-
Chronicles.
How does it have the
Definitive
same
Edition.
effort? How do you know what has the same effort?
Literally, it was being developed by the core Zelda team. That's all they made for 2 straight years was that game. They didn't make anything else. They just worked on the Wind Waker HD.
That they had some help from an outside team with that, from what I understand.
No, that was
With
Twilight
Wind
Princess
Waker
HD. Twilight Princess HD was completely
No,
done
I'm-
by an
I'm
outside.
almost okay, but you're saying that they worked on that for 2 years.
Yes, they were trying
Okay,
to
but that
figure out
doesn't mean-
HD game development. They were
They were
experimenting
trying
with
to
HD
figure
game
out
development.
HD game development. Okay, they were struggling because they were behind on HD. Okay,
Yes, they were
That
trying to figure out
doesn't
HD game
mean-
development. So they were
that
experimenting
doesn't
with
mean
different
that
games.
they did more in overhauling things than Xenoblade, bruh. Like it doesn't mean that. Like you're really fixated on that, but I don't know why.
Because you're lacking.
saying that my
no,
def-
here's the
you're
thing.
saying that-
You have more knowledge on Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition than I do. I completely agree on that. You've been following it much more closely. You're big into the game. You're big into RPGs, JRPGs, etc. So I know you have a much higher knowledge about what's happening with that game, all this stuff. I don't even remember the release date of when that game comes out. I know is it next month? I can't remember.
May 29th.
May 29th, yeah, because I know Ninjala comes out a couple days beforehand. Anyways, so I know you have more knowledge on that. I know I have more knowledge on the development of the Wind Waker HD. And from everything you have told me about Xenoblade Chronicles 2, or Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, sorry, that literally is what they did to the Wind Waker HD. Not Twilight Princess HD, the Wind Waker HD. And I still consider it a remaster. And you consider it a remaster because it visually looks similar.
You literally just said that it's 50% of the models. I don't know
Over
all the
50%.
development.
Over
50%, but it's not 100. It's not 100.
And you
so
don't know
not
that
the
it's
same
100
thing.
in this game either.
I can clearly see that it is by looking at the models.
So you can guarantee me that going in there, every texture in the game is brand new. Every single texture.
I said the character models.
Yeah,
We were
all the
talking about
character models in the Wind Waker HD were
I
brand
can
new
tell you
too.
that the main character. Okay, every character models in the Wind Waker HD are. Every single character model is brand new. I don't know about. But okay, if you want to say that, that's fine, Nate. If you want to say that every single character model in the Wind Waker HD is completely brand new.
They remade the character models in Wind Waker HD.
Every single thing in there.
They
but
did.
It was pretty clear that they remastered the game. The game was remastered. We all know
the
it
thing is, that's
my
the thing,
definition, personally, my definition, okay, is when I clearly see that there is that. When I clearly see, okay? When I clearly see, and I've seen enough with Xenoblade, I've seen enough to see that, yo, this is actually more than what
So when they
doing
added
with
new
Wind Waker,
animations
based on
in the
my
Wind Waker
opinion.
HD, they added new animations. Facial expressions. They added new facial expressions. They also added literally new combat moves. Literally new combat moves in the game.
Okay.
They added new
not
control
completely remade,
mechanisms,
though.
new UI. They didn't add any new content per se.
What
That's
about
a
the
big
engine? What
difference.
was the engine running on? You know that?
God, off the top of my head, it was not the Wind Waker engine. It was God.
Did they port the engine over to the Switch, or was it running on a new engine?
It was kind of it was kind of like what's happened in Xenoblade, where it was an engine from the prior system that had been modified and then modified again. Just like Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is not technically a new engine; it's a modified engine that they've been using for a little bit. So that's what they were using with the Wind Waker HD. But I can't remember exactly what it's called because Nintendo doesn't talk about their engines as often. They just mentioned it was put into a new engine.
And I understand that, but Nate, my definition still doesn't change in terms of remake. It
I'm
really
just
doesn't.
I'm, I'm
If
just
you want
drawing the
to,
correlation that the way
and I
you're
know that
defining
you,
Tim
mate,
kind of Definitive Edition is what they did with the Wind Waker HD. You just don't think that way because
but
it visually
I
looks
know,
similar.
but Nate, I have
Oh,
had countless examples of a remake, and you can't think of one before 2019 or
just
before Pokemon.
because maybe
You
there
can't
wasn't
think of a
one.
single
Maybe
one.
there wasn't one. Just because they said, just because the developer says it,
Mate,
doesn't
are
mean
you
that
a
I believe
Zoomer?
it.
What do you mean? What type of logic is that? There was no remakes before 2018?
There could have been, but I can't think of all the time. I'm sure there's some. As an example, I can think of one right now. Gotcha. Zork. Return to Zork.
Zork? I don't know
Zork.
what the hell that is.
Oh, there's an old school game you don't know about. So back in the day, when video games or gaming in general was just really young, a lot of things were these text-based games, right? You'd play them on your PC. It would be like, "Do you want to go here?" You type yes or no, and then it goes down that path. And there's nothing visually really going on. It's just text. It's like a book, like an interactive book. But that was early video games. That's what they were. Zork and Return to Zork, when those games came out again later on the floppy disk, this is way back in the early PC gaming days, were complete remakes of the original Zork. Complete remakes.
So what you're telling me is that games like Resident that played the same weren't a remake based off of your definition. Games like Metal Gear weren't a remake based off of your definition. But
without more
but
knowledge
Zork
of those
is a remake.
versions, I would say that they're remasters.
right.
Without more knowledge.
Zork is the remake. Resident Evil on the GameCube is not enough of a remake because it has similar aspects to the original. Twilight or Twin Snakes is not a remake because it plays like there's not enough.
Remake the
It's
thing
not
from the 50s.
completely remaking the game, so it's not a remake. But Zork, text-based to non-text-based.
Yeah, it was rebuilt from the ground up.
Everything that I think, and look, in my
Zork.
definition, then it would fit my definition. But your
Well, yeah,
definition,
if you knew about that game back then, you would.
Yeah.
It was one of my earliest gaming
definition-
experiences was that. So.
Your definition, stuff that we had that were clearly remakes: Pokemon Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Pokemon Silver, Resident Evil, Twin Snakes. All these games clearly are not remakes because we don't know if they are them because we can't peer into code and because we can't do stuff like that.
I can't tell you because I don't have the experience with those games to know how much different the original and the new one is.
Okay, well, I mean, I have experience with them. These are
understand.
games that we've always seen, that were definitely remakes. So,
And maybe this fits my definition of remake too. I just don't know.
why can't you look at the game and tell us your definition?
Because I don't base it on visuals alone. You're such a visual-oriented thing. If I go watch a YouTube video on an original like Metal Gear, and then I watch Metal Gear Twin Snakes or Solid or whatever the remake one was, I'm just going to look at it and all I want to see is a visual perspective. I'm not going to know the inner workings and the mechanical differences or anything that's different about the games other than this game looks better than this game. Your just looking from the outside in, it doesn't give you all the knowledge. Like if someone just watches Xenoblade Chronicles,
your fundamental opinion is in order for this to be a remake, they have to completely remake the. That's what.
It's got to be remade from the ground up.
So back to full circle. Shadow of the Colossus, even though it's clearly a remake, and everyone said
it was made from the ground up.
It's not. It's not a remake based on. So Shadow of the Colossus, Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, all these games that were clearly labeled as remakes,
and they might be remakes if they were rebuilt. So I just want to make sure
that's what you're saying.
I'm saying that I don't have the knowledge to know if the remakes are. If they were rebuilt from the ground up, then they are.
Let's just say that they were built from the ground up, but they play exactly the same.
Well, if they're rebuilt from the ground up, that's a remake.
Yeah.
If they're rebuilt from the ground up, that's a remake.
But it plays exactly the same.
But it's still a remake. It's rebuilt from the ground up. That's literally my only definition is as rebuilt from the ground up.
It's rebuilt from the ground up, but you literally just said remakes have to completely change the mechanics.
They don't have to completely change it. They need to be. When you remake something from the ground up, when you play, be honest with me. When you play Spyro Reignited and you go back and play the older Spyro games, does it feel exactly the same when you're playing them?
Nate, no.
What? I literally said this whole time the remakes are built from the ground up.
They have to change enough with the gameplay in order for it to be a remake. Now you're saying if they remake the game completely and it's exactly the same, if they remade it from the ground up, it's a remake? We can't peer into code to know this type of stuff, man.
But we
Like,
can. Just because you don't do it
come
doesn't mean
on.
you can't.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm gonna be. I think I'm gonna be. I think I'm gonna be done here because I don't
Okay.
like that. I don't.
You don't
I
like
don't
that.
like that.
That's okay. I still don't like your stance in the EA debate either.
I don't like your stance on that, sir. Because you literally just said, you said a bit ago that games have to play fundamentally different for them to be remakes. And that's why you said, you mentioned Pokemon. You mentioned Final Fantasy. You mentioned Resident Evil. And now you're saying a game can be completely remade to play the same, but it's from the ground up. Even though, what's the point of remaking a game from the ground up if you're going to make it exactly the same?
It wouldn't be exactly the same. That's the problem. It wouldn't be
But
exactly
what
the
if
same
they
as rebuild.
wanted?
I'm gonna load up my stream. I know there were some issues with my stream. Let me. I don't know if you guys could see anything, or if all you could do was hear. I don't know what was going on. It kept spitting out an error to me that it's not maintaining enough connection, and I'm wired, so I don't understand why that was happening. But hi, this is obviously a different camera because I can't use my other camera because that camera was loaded up in Discord for that conversation. I'm just loading up the chat here. I'm going to read off some of the people who super chatted along the way. Again, apologies if the stream wasn't working. All you could do is hear, yeah. I had a feeling because we got we had a lot of high views, but we didn't have a lot of like retaining of the viewership because I figured the video wasn't working. I don't know why. I do Discord calls and stream all the time. That's how we do the Nintendo Prime podcast. For some reason, I don't know why with Player Essence, it just wasn't working. And now it's working fine. So, that being said, let me read off some of the people who did some super chats earlier. Actually, let me bring up Streamlabs quick here and see. It's got a better tracking for who donated or super chatted. So during the stream, we had 2 new followers, and Eric Oliphant and Fernando Morales. Thank you guys so much. Blue Bolt did a $2 super chat, and then we had Eric Popowich super chatted $5 as well. It said remake from The Thing, 50s, the John Carpenter movie, etc. So yeah, that's cool. Oh, we also have a new member, Alec Levine. I don't have any notifications set up for this. Hold on. Let me see if I can set up a better stream layout for you guys. I just have to get my camera into this layout, and then you guys can see notifications. Let me add in this secondary camera here. This is my... What camera is this? See, I'm not set up to use 2 cameras right now, so it's all video capture device. There we go. We want to use the webcam. Add that in, and I want to bring that below everything. Make that bigger. Get to my a more normal stream layout for me so you guys can see notifications. There we go. All right. Thank you, Alec Levine. The minute I brought up Zork, I lost. I guess, if you want to say that. Here's the thing. In debates, I don't really view debates as like a winning and losing prospect. I understand if you guys do. That's the way everything works when you watch political debates. You watch any sort of debate on anything, if we're being completely honest. Everything has winners and losers. But I don't know if there was ever a winner and loser, and you might say that's what a loser would say. But I think it's a disagreement. This is really what happened with really everything to do with Player Essence and me debating. It's often that we're debating opinions and how we define things. Back with the EA debate, that was just a hypothetical opinion on what could happen in the future based on concerns I had in the present. He disagreed with those concerns, and then that was the debate, and it went round and round and round for a couple hours. This one as well. Just caught every again. It's a definition thing, and I had a feeling if you think that he won or slaughtered me, that's cool. I literally said at the very beginning he was probably going to slaughter me because I knew I had a lack of research and I knew I couldn't remember things exactly the way that I want. I just know what my definitions are and what I have been using at least my entire YouTube career. I didn't really think much about remasters and remakes before my YouTube career because it wasn't a debate I actively participated or cared to participate in. I just played games and enjoyed them. Other people like to do that. They like to debate on the internet especially. I just avoid a lot of those debates. The only debates I've had for the last 20 years were about Zelda because that's the only thing I paid attention to online. I didn't pay attention to debates around other things in gaming because I didn't care. Thanks, Alec. But again, I don't really think it's yeah, it let me Google it. I thought it was a little weird when he wouldn't let me Google it. It's like, dude. And the thing is, he kind of knew about my TBI from a while ago. He probably just forgot about it because it's been a while. But I don't know why Googling would have mattered. Like, he let me Google up, what is it, Resident Evil 1 on PlayStation 1 and GameCube. And literally, like, yeah, the GameCube one looks a hell of a lot prettier. But what is that going to tell me about if it's a remake or a remaster? Like, just because it looks prettier. Again, it's a visual thing, and he just kept arguing visuals. And I just think that visuals don't tell the whole story on remakes versus remasters, but it's all right. I understand the way he views things. I don't know if he fully understands the way I view things. But that's okay. It's funny when someone said the moment I brought up Zork, that I lost it. It's like, nah, I think the Zork example made sense. See, that's the thing. Zork, to me, it feels like an out of left field example. Because it's a game I know that a vast majority of you have never heard of. I mean, this is old. Like, when did Zork and Return to Zork come out? I'm trying to remember. 1980. 1980, before I was even born, Zork came out. And then Return to Zork came out in 1993. So we're talking about games that, for him and I being the same age, we would have been very, very young or not even alive yet. And then being a PC gamer. I don't think back in those days he was a PC gamer. I was a Nintendo and PC gamer. That's what I did. I was playing Duke Nukem. I was playing obviously Doom back in the day, but I'm trying to remember some other ones. Wolfenstein, the old school Wolfenstein game, I was playing that back in the day. Gnome, which is G period N period O period M period E period. I forget what it actually means, but that was the name on the box anyway. It was Gnome, which was a mech warrior game. Those are the games like I grew, like my very earliest gaming memories beyond the NES were those games. And that's why I brought them up, because I happen to know that Zork and Return to Zork in particular, I'm not sure about Zork 3, were remakes of original text-based PC games. That's why I brought him up. And I knew he wasn't going to get that example at all. And the funny thing is, and this is what, I guess maybe the only frustrating thing for me out of that debate when I brought up the Zork stuff, was that he kind of like laughed at it because he didn't have knowledge of it. I didn't laugh at any of the stuff that he had knowledge of that I couldn't recall or just don't have the knowledge of. I didn't laugh at it. I was like, he's making legit points. It's cool. I just can't speak from experience. But I found a game. I finally found a game after him berating me for, I don't know, a half hour. Not really berating. I guess poking at me to come up with an example. I came up with one, and then he laughed about it. So it's like, how am I supposed to debate if, like, you're just going to dismiss my example? Like, you asked for one, and I gave you one. Could I come up with 3? Well, Zork and Return to Zork. But after that, I don't know. It's hard for me to recall because I didn't think about it back then. And the only reason I even know about Zork and Return to Zork were remakes, because I didn't realize they were remakes when I was a kid, was when I got older and I was looking up some strategy guides because I hadn't beat those games yet. And I realized that, holy crud, Zork was actually a text-based game on PCs like back in the 70s. Like, I had no idea. I had no clue that was the case. I found that out and I'm like, oh, so it was a remake. Huh. Pretty cool. But I didn't think like that back when I was a kid. Like, I thought the mentality that he had growing up was interesting. Player Essence, to me, this is maybe just more of a commentary on him as a person. It's not a bad commentary. It's just, he is a person that is very fiery and likes to debate things and gets heated. The only debates I had with gaming when I was a kid were about N64 versus PlayStation SNES versus Genesis, like who had better visuals. That's all the debates we had. We didn't have debates over remasters or remakes. We didn't even use those words. They weren't even in our vocabulary for video games because we just played games. We hung out and we played games. We played track and field. We didn't really think like that. We didn't think we needed to define things. Games were games. Why do we need a definition? And even in the early internet days, when I was running websites on GeoCities, and it was a Zelda website and all that, and I was reading IGN, the term remake and remaster didn't come up very often. So it just wasn't something that I thought about that much. And that's what, you talk about revisionist history, I suppose. It didn't feel like revisionist history to me because I didn't think like that back then. I didn't even care. I still, to be honest, don't care. But it does get weird watching people like argue about it, and that's weird because I just did it. But people argue about something that I just don't think matters. But gamers get so passionate. Deadlock says, Player Essence couldn't think of any old games that fit his definition. Why didn't he use Tomb Raider Anniversary and Resident Evil 1 Remake? You mean, why didn't I? Because he was asking for me to find old games that fit my definition. Because he brought up a bunch of games that fit his definition. I couldn't think of any off the top of my head, but then I remembered Zork, and he didn't like that example for some reason. Probably because he just didn't know it. Lack of knowledge. He's ignorant on the Zork IP, so I'm not surprised. It's not, I mean, there are people that know it. People, when I say Zork, if you've heard of it, you're one of the people that like probably is into those kind of games. It's a very niche type of game. What about Link's Awakening is not a remake? Now, I can take off my headphones now. Oh, finally. Let me talk about that for a second. Where is it back here? Link's Awakening, where are you? So, there's Link's Awakening. Got the game. So, I have not played this game yet. I have not played it yet. Have not played it. I played it at E3, but I haven't played the actual game. This game, I don't believe. This is a personal opinion that I haven't bothered to confirm. I don't believe that this game is a full-on remake. I think that it's a lot of the same code put into a new engine. And I say that based on how Link moves. When I played this game, thanks for subscribing. Our class? I can't even say it, but thank you for subscribing. When I played this game when I was a kid, I really, it was my first ever Zelda game. So I have a really deep connection to Link's Awakening. But when I played this at E3, while it looked prettier and has this whole new visual stuff going on, clearly in a new engine, how Link moved is not how Link moves in pretty much any of the recent top-down Zelda games. But it is how he moved in Link's Awakening back on the Game Boy. And because of that, very clearly they reused some code. Because it's not better that Link moves the way he does in Link's Awakening. What I mean is that he can't basically move in 16 directions, I guess is the typical thing for a top-down game. He moves in 8. And that's just how Link moves. It's a very deliberate 8 directions. And because of that, that's exactly what he did back in the old games. There's no reason for him to do that if they're remaking the game, because they have a bunch of top-down Zelda games that don't work that way since Link's Awakening. But yet the remake does that, which tells me they reused stuff, reused a lot, if we're probably being honest, and just literally new engine, fresh coat of painted it. And it's basically the same game. Now, they did add new content, of course, the Zelda Dungeon Maker stuff. I haven't played it yet, so beyond E3, but my experience with the game is that it's the same game. It just looks prettier. subjectively. Some people think the original looks better. It's the same game, and Link controls exactly the same. Like, literally how he moves and everything, very clear. Like, that's the thing. There are other top-down Zelda games since then that don't move the way this Link, the way he moves is very specific to Link's Awakening. So, just, I don't know. Maybe after I play it, get more experience with it, maybe I'll, with my knowledge of Link's Awakening, what I can remember, maybe I'll play the original first, then I'll play this one, or play the DX version. Maybe then I'll play this one, and maybe I'll agree that things are different, but the enemy movement patterns were very similar. The AI was like basically identical. I guarantee that this game was largely the original code ported into a new engine, and then obviously they added, made changes and additions to that. But I don't know. I withheld over getting Link's Awakening because of the $60 price. I got Witcher 3 instead on Switch, which was worth. Nintendo will probably not drop the price, so I'll wait. It's funny that you say that about Witcher 3, since you can get it so cheap everywhere else. A lot of people think the $60 price on Switch isn't worth it. Armando Medina says, to be fair, dude, the reason it has become an important argument is because nowadays people consider remasters crap quality. And that, I think, is the problem. And I brought that up in the stream, and I guess it kind of got dismissed a little bit. That remakes and remasters, the problem is people are attaching quality to these. It shouldn't be a qualitative thing. Like, it shouldn't be that a remake is considered higher quality than a remaster. That really shouldn't be how we look at it. The quality of a remake and the quality of a remaster, you can have a remaster that's a lot better than a remake. I don't think it should be a quality-based thing. But it's become this because people like having definitions. Let me roll that back a bit. People like having terms. And they like being able to dismiss people with those terms. Oh, you're into that? It's just a remaster. Oh, you're excited about that? It's just a remaster. Like, people like to have terms they can use to dismiss other people's opinions. And it's kind of sad that we live in a world where people's opinions are so quickly and easily dismissed by just throwing out, oh, it's this, so who cares? It can be anything. Oh, it's just a port, so who cares? I've heard that one a lot. That's the one that's why I kept bringing up ports all the time, because that's the term that was used a ton with me growing up. The term port. We use that word over and over and over again my entire childhood, and it's still used to this day. Now just sometimes we call it an HD port. So yeah, it's. I think people like to have these terms and like to have them defined so they can use them to dismiss others instead of having an actual discussion. Like, what would have been better to me? What would have been better to me instead of debating whether it's a port or a remaster is just talking about how excited we are for probably very different reasons for Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. And he's going to be excited from his deeper knowledge of the experience. And I could talk about why I'm excited based on my little bit of experience with Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and what I was kind of turned off by that it looks like isn't like that in the original game, and how I didn't play the original game on Wii. So that's a whole nother excitement level as well for me. And it would have been really cool to have a conversation about how excited we are for Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. That, to me, is a far, far, far more interesting debate. Conversation. But not as many people are going to care about that. People want debates. They want disagreements. They want fire. They want yelling. They want screaming. They want people going at each other's throats over stuff that literally shouldn't matter. But people try to make it matter. I personally think it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters what term you use. It's not a quality determining term, but other people disagree. So it is what it is. I really don't care, by the way, if people disagree with my opinion. People disagree with my opinion all the time. I definitely am not like this big know-it-all person. And hey, Ninjala comes out tomorrow, the beta test for it. Are you guys ready? You guys ready for some Ninjala action? You better go get your preloads in, because it might be almost impossible to download it while it's going on. Ninjala. I'm pretty excited for that. I did my last video I did on it was about Ninjala back on Friday. I'll read what some of you guys said. I'm just scrolling up. I didn't get a chance to read a lot of the chat. You're gonna have some code in the remake. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of there's going to be similar code even in remakes. I think there's a difference though between like importing the code and then building on top of it versus building a new game from the ground up, but then grabbing bits and pieces of code and bringing it over. I think that's where my difference between remake and remaster come. Where like a remaster or a remake, might have some reused stuff because coders, as speaking as one, we reuse things all the time. From other programs or other apps or other whatever. But we don't import the entire code base when we're building something new or from the ground up. We don't import the entire code base. We start from nothing and we'll bring in little snippets here and there, but we won't bring in the whole thing. But I mean, that's getting a little more technical. Personally, I like debates because of the different ideas clashing and different points of view. The yelling and drama is kind of unfortunate byproduct. Happens. Do we know if the game will allow people to bring over their save files from other consoles to the Switch? What game? Oh, Xenoblade Chronicles? I don't think you'll be able to bring over save files. I assume not. Are you talking about something else? You can, with The Witcher 3, you can. You can bring it over from PC, your save file, if that's what you're talking about. Cody Shadley came in and he said, as a programmer myself, I can't tell you how many times I've reused code. It's actively encouraged to dude, it's almost impossible to not reuse code as a coder. Like, you'll never be done with your project if you have to write everything from scratch. So, like, and I was hoping that he would bring that up because that would mean that he has knowledge of coding, that coders are always reusing code. But the point I was making is that there's a difference between copy pasting some code in or some code in that does something that you need to do and you've already coded it once before, so grabbing that code from somewhere else, versus importing an entire game's worth of code and then editing and building on top of that. There is a huge difference, and that's what I think is happening with Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. I think they imported the code into the new engine and then built on top of that, and that's why I feel it's a remaster. That and the fact that pretty much 90% of the animations, maybe 95% of the animations are exactly the same. That's a pretty big indicator because a lot of the code base in a game will be animations. So that's a pretty big indicator that it's really copied. Just because there's some new animations added in, yeah, I just said you import the original code and you build on top of it, so you can still add new stuff. But that's just me. It's cool if you want to call it a remake. I really don't care. Nintendo doesn't use either term. One reason why I love Nintendo, they don't use either term. Like, they're not calling this a remake or a remaster. It just is Definitive Edition. And if you look at Nintendo's prior Definitive Editions, you might be like, that's a really crappy name. Doesn't really matter. Nintendo just doesn't care. They live in their own world. You were talking about Xenoblade Definitive Edition. I'm pretty sure you can't import any saves from Wii to that. Or 3DS, right? Xenoblade was brought to 3DS. Or the new Nintendo 3DS. New Nintendo 2DS, I think, can play it too. You're going to stream Ninjala tomorrow? I'm planning to stream it. A lot's going to depend. I got to look at what time was that at? I forgot. Ninjala beta test. What time was that at? Open beta tomorrow. I'm trying to remember what the hours were. So it's an hour long beta test tomorrow and the 29th. So 12 Pacific would be 2 o'clock my time, so 2 to 3. Yeah, I'll probably be streaming it for that hour. And if not, then I'll stream on the 29th. Looks like they have one really late at night too. But it'll be too late for me to stream that one. So, yeah. So if I don't stream tomorrow, I definitely will stream on the 29th. But I'm gonna be playing it even if I'm not streaming, just because I want to. And I won't get to play it again until what, the 27th, like a month from now. If Player Essence thinks they remade all the code from the ground up, or most of it, he doesn't understand code. Well, the whole reason I even talked about code is he mentioned code. If you guys remember really early on in the debate, he kept bringing up, well, the code is different. And, like, he kept talking about something that I knew just based on the videos of him that I've seen and the streams I've seen, that he doesn't know a lot about coding and how coding works. And I'm not saying I used all the exact right terms and definitions for it as well. Like, I'm very early in my coding career. But I think that as soon as he started mentioning code, I was like, man, I got to get him on the code later, because I don't think he understands how code works. Like, I'm 99% sure they imported the game into the engine, because why wouldn't they? There's no reason for them not to. There's no reason to rebuild a game that plays exactly the same from the ground up, without attempting to import the code and then error correcting and building on top of. The only reason to rebuild from the ground up would be if they imported the code and it was so messed up with so many errors in the new engine that it wasn't worth the hassle to fix and patch it. It would be better to just rebuild. But that probably isn't the case on a more modern game. A game that's been brought to Wii, 3DS. It's a more modern game, so chances are the entire game was imported into the new engine. Like, that's based on developers I've talked to. That's like what they do for remakes / remasters of more modern games, is they literally import. And if they do that now, then why would they have been doing that back in the day? But that's just me. He can go on and on about how there wasn't proof, but it's like, you literally just put the game on your PC and you can look at the code. But I don't expect him to do it, because he doesn't understand coding and how it works and all that. Infinite loops and blah, 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 blah. Heck, even basic stuff like if else statements. Again, I'm in the really basic stages of coding myself, so I can't do everything. But it's like saying Xenoblade Chronicles 3D is a remake. I think he would call that a remaster, but I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe he'll call it. Well, yeah, because he'd probably consider it just a port. So I think he would call it a remaster. I think it's a remaster. I don't even know if it's a remaster. Again, things that are like ports like that, I just call them ports. But I don't know. That would be a lot of. That's one thing I was trying to mention. Like 2 years. So you think they built Xenoblade Chronicles in 2 years? Like, man. Am I doing Java? A little bit. I don't do a lot of Java, though. But I know some Java. But it's not really a focus. More C++ territory than Java. But I don't know. I'm literally attending college again in June and finishing off my programming degree. So there'll be, I don't know how many languages I will know exactly. C++ for sure I will know, but I'm not sure what other ones after that. Probably depends on which classes I end up taking. But I think Java, I've had a Java class before, and I think Java is still part of my program, so I think I still will have at least one Java class. And then I don't know. I don't know much about developing for mobile phones, and I have some mobile phone development classes as well, so I'm not even sure what languages they use for mobile phones. You like Python way more? My dad knows some Python. My dad's a programmer, for those that don't know. People wonder where I get the idea to be a programmer from. My dad's a programmer. CTO of a company. Ninjala. All right, that's gonna do it. I have to go put my bathroom back together. I don't know if you guys can see on my hand. There's like paint. I was painting my bathroom today. I gotta put it back together and then probably get to bed eventually. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the debate. I might talk to Player Essence. I might talk to Player Essence about downloading his stream since my video version wasn't working, and then splicing it together with the end of this stream, so then you guys can have a more complete debate video that has video. So I'll talk to him about that since there was video issues on my end, just so you guys have a video version of it as well, and not just the audio that's going to be up and wonky for people. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know when the next debate will be. What was the last debate with him? Was that like a year and a half ago? So I don't do debates very often, but they're fun. Catch you guys later.